Everything seemed so peaceful. The Lorenzi family lived in a cozy home in Cogne, a small Italian mountain town where evil was believed to be impenetrable. Two adorables sons, a successful father, a gentle mother. The picture-perfect family picture was admired by the neighbors. But on the morning of January 30, 2002, that peace was shattered. With a panicked voice and shaking hands, Maria Franzoni called an ambulance, screaming that her youngest son, Samuele, was dying. When the rescue helicopter landed just minutes later, paramedics rushed in. But what they saw in the small bedroom was beyond imagination. A blood-stained floor, crimson sheets, and little Samuele's lifeless body with 18 horrific wounds on his head, as if someone had unleashed their fury on his tiny body. In that moment, the chilling question resounded: who could commit such a barbaric crime? And right in the very house that was supposed to be the safest place for a child, who was the real culprit? Watch the whole video to discover this shocking secret in Italy. Maria Franzoni was born on August 19, 1971 in Bologna. She was the youngest of 6 children in a close-knit, happy, and relatively well-off family. Her father ran a successful construction company. Her mother devoted herself to taking care of her children and maintaining a warm, friendly home. From a young age, Anna was ambitious and high-achieving. She excelled in school, took dance lessons, and was meticulous about her appearance. She was adored by her parents and older siblings. Despite her comfortable upbringing, she craved independence. At 18, she moved to another city, enrolled in university, and worked as a hotel receptionist. She advanced quickly to manager, earning a reputation for handling difficult situations with skill. In the mid-1990 seconds, Anna met Stefano Lorenzi, a guest staying at the hotel where she worked. Their connection was immediate. They began seeing each other regularly, and soon he asked her to move in. Stefano, an engineer from Bologna, had left city life for the quiet of Cogne, a small mountain town in the Aosta Valley. He had saved enough to buy a spacious house there. With around 1,500 residents and virtually no crime, Cogne offered a peaceful life. In 1995, Stefano proposed and Anna accepted. They married in a romantic seaside ceremony and moved into his home in Cogne. Soon after, Anna became pregnant, and by the end of the year, their first son, Davide, was born. In 1990, they welcomed their second son, Samuele. After Samuele's birth, Anna left her job to focus on the family and household. To everyone who knew them, the Lorenzis seemed genuinely happy. Anna was praised as an impeccable homemaker, devoted wife, and loving mother. Despite caring for 2 young children, she kept the house immaculate and maintained a polished appearance. Stefano's career flourished, and he earned a promotion that allowed him to provide a comfortable, worry-free life. In fall 2001, Davide started school and quickly stood out as one of the brightest students. Teachers praised his intelligence and curiosity. From the outside, the Lorenzi family appeared to be living a dream. Nothing seemed likely to disturb their perfect world. But in January 2002, tragedy struck, an event so shocking that it would take years to untangle what really happened. On January 30, 2002, around 9 a.m., a panicked woman called for help. She said her son was gravely ill, vomiting blood, and pleaded for immediate assistance. About 20 minutes later, the town heard a helicopter circling, searching for a landing spot. When the medical team arrived, they were met by Daniela Ferrata, a neighbor who had rushed over after hearing Anna's screams. She was waiting outside with Anna for the medics to arrive. Inside the house, on the first floor, the family doctor, also called by Anna, was already providing emergency care to Samuele before the city medical team arrived. Upstairs, in the second-floor bedroom, Anna held Samuele and begged for help. The room was stained dark with blood. A gauze bandage on Samuele's head was soaked through with blood and tissue. He was unconscious and showed no signs of life. He was airlifted to the hospital, But despite the team's efforts, they could not resuscitate him. Less than 30 minutes later, his parents were told he had died. It soon became clear that Anna's first account was inaccurate. Samuele had not been vomiting blood. Under the head bandage were multiple deep wounds caused by a sharp object used with great force. He had been struck several times, fracturing his skull in multiple places and causing catastrophic brain damage, leaving almost no chance of survival. What, then, had happened in this seemingly peaceful home? And who could have done this? From the beginning, Samuele's case appeared odd and suspicious. Anna could not clearly explain what had happened, and the first witnesses on the scene were equally confused. The father, Stefano, rushed home from work, but arrived after Samuele had already been airlifted, so he never got to say goodbye. When he received the call informing him of the death of his youngest son, Samuele, his father, Stefano, collapsed, covering Stefano and crying. However, Anna reportedly remained calm, hugging her husband tightly and saying that she wanted another child to replace Samuele, a claim that both she and he later firmly denied. Anna seemed to be in shock, mumbling and unable to reconstruct the sequence of events. Her statements were inconsistent and sometimes contradictory, and the witnesses' accounts added more confusion. Once foul play was suspected, investigators examined every detail to understand how and why it had happened. Anna said she woke up around 7:00 a.m., made breakfast for Stefano, and sent him off around 7:45 a.m. She then woke Davide, fed him, and packed his school lunch. At that moment, she heard Samuele crying and went to him. He complained of a headache, so she moved him to her bedroom to rest while she walked Davide to the bus stop. The bus was about 5 minutes late, so she waited until he boarded. When she returned, she found a horrific scene, blood everywhere, and could not understand what had happened. Believing he had vomited blood, she called the family doctor, who lived nearby. After discovering the head wound, Anna screamed. Neighbor Daniela, hearing the cries, rushed over and found Anna covered in blood. Anna shouted that Samuele's head had exploded and begged for help. Daniela stepped inside and approached the bedroom, but ran out almost immediately, suppressing nausea. What she saw was like a scene from a horror film. Anna kept repeating that Samuele had complained of a headache before she found him in that condition. The first person to assess Samuele was the family doctor, who arrived shortly after the call. Over the phone, Anna first said Samuele was vomiting blood, then said his head had exploded. While this description sounded unusual, the doctor tried to offer a plausible explanation. He speculated that Samuele's skull bones may not have fused properly, leading to a ruptured brain aneurysm, causing severe brain damage and increasing pressure within the skull, which in turn caused the fracture. The family doctor could only dress the open wound and give an anti-shock injection before the emergency helicopter arrived. He later admitted that, even then, he knew Samuele's chances of survival were minimal. He also recalled that Anna's clothes, hands, and face were smeared with blood, which he initially attributed to her desperate attempts to help her son. But after learning from the medical examiner that Samuele had suffered 18 head wounds from a sharp object, likely a knife, and that the attack was clearly premeditated, the doctor's account shifted. He suddenly remembered something unusual. Small particles of brain matter tangled in Anna's hair, and he couldn't explain how they got there. Despite these inconsistencies, authorities were slow to charge Anna. She claimed that the incident happened while she was at the bus stop with her eldest son, Davide. According to her, Samuele woke up seemingly fine, just fussy and complaining of a headache. Davide supported his mother's testimony, saying he saw no blood and that Samuele was still in his parents' bedroom when they left. Could an unknown attacker have waited until only Samuele was home, then entered and carried out such a brutal assault? Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of forced entry, and the ferocity of the attack suggested a deeply personal motive. Investigators considered whether Stefano might have had a secret lover who sought revenge or wanted to pressure him into leaving his family. That lead was thoroughly explored and dismissed. Stefano appeared to be a devoted husband and loving father with no history of infidelity. With no alternative suspects, attention turned to Anna. Still, Police needed more evidence and a clearer understanding of the context and motive. The murder weapon was never found, neither in the home nor on the property. Anna and Stefano's bedroom, where the attack took place, was covered in blood. But investigators found no fingerprints or other traces other than those of their family. With limited physical evidence, they turned to what was then an advanced technique, bloodstain pattern analysis. This could help reconstruct the trajectory and angle of the blows, the assailant's position, and movements during the attack. Given the extensive blood spatter covering nearly every surface, the analysis would be painstaking. Experts from the Capitol were summoned, but their conclusions were still inconclusive. A new possibility emerged: a deranged intruder. The blows were so violent that blood reached the ceiling, and the attacker could have fled with the weapon. But this theory quickly ran into problems. An assailant would have left wearing blood-soaked clothes and shoes, yet no such traces were found. There were no bloody shoe prints, only bare footprints belonging to Anna. No neighbors reported anything suspicious, even though the street was crowded with people going to work and school. But a person covered in blood would have been spotted. Behind the bed where Samuele was attacked, investigators found a crumpled pair of Anna's pajamas stained with blood. Strangely, there were no bloodstains on the floor beneath them or in that corner. Anna had changed clothes before taking Davide to the bus stop and did not put those pajamas back on afterward. So how did they get blood on them? Moreover, the stains were spatter, not the kind you'd see if the fabric had been used to apply pressure to a wound. Investigators also found her house slippers tucked away, with blood on the soles. Taken together, the evidence increasingly pointed to Anna as the perpetrator. Anna had always strived to be the best in the city. She thrived, top of her class, an exemplary university student, and a valued hotel employee. Everything changed when she married Stefano and moved to a small town. There, everyone knew each other, and bored housewives gossiped about homes, families, and appearances, always hunting for flaws. Anna Maria felt she had to be perfect. She kept her home spotless, dressed like a movie star, supported Stefano's career, and pushed Davide into a gifted program. Maintaining this image demanded constant effort and left her exhausted, physically and emotionally. The real crisis began after her second child, Samuele, was born. The pregnancy was difficult, and she developed severe postpartum depression. Her health declined. She lost weight. I couldn't sleep, and lived with constant anxiety. The family doctor prescribed sedatives, antidepressants, and sleeping pills, and recommended a few therapy sessions. Still, no one considered her a serious risk. The doctor observed no signs of dangerous mental illness, self-harm, or violence. However, Anna was extremely sensitive to others' opinions and took criticism to heart, becoming consumed by anxiety about her image. She once confided to a close friend and neighbor that her younger son, Samuele, was fussy and hard to handle, unlike Davide, and even called him unattractive, saying he didn't fit their picture-perfect family. Yet no one imagined she could harm him. The case drew national attention. Although the murder weapon was never found and Anna firmly denied involvement, she was arrested on March 14, 2002. Forensic experts claim the blood spatter on her pajamas could only have occurred during the attack on Samuele. Based on its pattern and location, prosecutors argued she had changed out of the pajamas, disposed of the weapon, and forgotten to get rid of that incriminating clothing. By summer, Anna was released to house arrest as the investigation continued. The court dismissed the bloodstain analysis as unreliable because the technique was not widely accepted or validated in Italy, making its accuracy questionable. Prosecutors then brought in foreign experts. Using a life-size mannequin and a stand-in with Anna's build, they recreated the attack. Their reconstruction suggested the blood pattern could have landed on her pajamas if the person wearing them sat on the bed opposite Samuele and struck downward with an object like a large hunting knife. The case was reopened in January of the following year, but Anna was not detained because she was pregnant, and psychological assessments found she posed no danger. In March 2003, 14 months after the tragedy, the Lorenzi family welcomed another son, Giovanni. Meanwhile, the case became a media spectacle, followed by tens of thousands. Anna's defense attorney, the flamboyant Carlo Taormina, quickly accused investigators of gross incompetence and launched his own investigation to expose weaknesses in the prosecution's case. Every time defense attorney Carlo Taormina spoke to the media or appeared in court, he introduced new theories and alleged evidence. Davide, who had initially given consistent testimony, suddenly remembered seeing a man dressed in black near the house, but he couldn't provide any details about the stranger. Prosecutors later accused Carlo of manipulating the boy's memories to suggest the presence of a mysterious outsider. Carlo also argued that the weapon wasn't a knife but a carpenter's claw hammer. According to him, each strike would create 2 wounds, meaning the total number of blows was half of what investigators originally claimed. This theory implied the attacker could have carried out the assault during the brief time Anna was walking David to the bus stop. The most significant new evidence was a shoe print found on the blanket wrapped around Samuele. It matched roughly a men's size 10, suggesting a male presence at the scene. Strangely, this print wasn't recorded during the initial investigation, even though the bloody blanket was collected as evidence. This omission appeared to be serious negligence that might have concealed proof of Anna's innocence. However, further analysis revealed that the shoe print was not blood. It was an ordinary dirt stain and couldn't have been left by the attacker. It was later proven to belong to a forensic photographer who had accidentally stepped on the edge of the blanket while documenting the scene. The photographer was charged with professional misconduct, and Anna again remained the primary suspect. In July 2004, Anna was convicted of the premeditated murder of her son, Samuele Lorenzi, and sentenced to 30 years in prison. A week later, she made a new accusation. She claimed their neighbor, Udis Garda, was the real culprit. She said he had repeatedly flirted with her and that she had always rejected him. Her husband, Stefano, supported her claim, saying Ulisse had shown inappropriate interest. Ulisse, stunned, denied everything and presented an airtight alibi. He was traveling for work that day. His account was verified, and he was cleared. He then filed a countersuit accusing Anna of defamation. In October 2004, a separate trial began for defamation and evidence tampering. Anna was found guilty again, and her sentence was extended by 1 year, complicating matters. Her attorney, Carlo Taormina, was barred from representing her further. A year later, Anna and Stefano came up with another theory. Their neighbor, Daniela, who was the first to respond to Anna's screams, may have caused the incident, allegedly out of jealousy. Investigators found no evidence against Daniela, and multiple family members confirmed her alibi. Insanity or not, Anna's new defense attorney adopted a different strategy, requesting a psychiatric evaluation. He argued that Anna experienced a brief psychotic break and wasn't aware of her actions. This approach delayed proceedings, and in April 2007, she was moved from prison to a hospital ward. The prosecution ultimately proved she was mentally competent and aware of her actions. She was convicted again, but the court recognized mitigating factors, particularly her prolonged postpartum depression, which may have contributed to a psychological crisis, and the fact that she had 2 sons. Her sentence was reduced from 30 years to 16, with eligibility for early release. After 11, in May 2008, another appeal by Anna and her lawyer was rejected, and the sentence stood. Around the same time, her former attorney, Carlo Taormina, sued her for nearly $80,000 in unpaid attorney fees or foreclosure of their family home. His claims were dismissed, and he failed to recover any payment. In 2013, Anna's sentence was reduced for good behavior. Her punishment changed from prison to house arrest, allowing her to return home. Psychiatrists determined she no longer posed a risk to society. By 2019, she received early parole. Anna and her husband, Stefano, are still together, but they have moved to another city. They sold the house where the tragedy occurred because they could not bear to live there. Throughout this time, Anna's loved ones never abandoned her. Her family supported her, convinced of her innocence. The family still believes that the real perpetrator of the crime against Samuele is still at large and has not been punished. It started like a fairy tale. Beauty, ambition, and a love that promised the world. But behind the smiles and glitter was a darkness no one saw coming. Lisa Buchanan believed she had found the man who would lift her higher, but instead, he pulled her into a spiral of control, addiction, and fear. One summer night, she was rushed to the hospital, her body broken, her pulse fading. Days later, she was gone. Officially, they called it an overdose. To her family, it was murder. So, what really happened to Lisa Buchanan? Was she a victim of her own choices, or of the man who claimed to love her? Stay with me until the end, because this story isn't just about a tragic death. It's about a toxic love so dangerous, it left everyone asking the same haunting question. Was it fate, or was it a crime? Lisa Buchanan was born on June 29, 1972. In a small town in Ohio, USA, she was creative, beautiful, and sociable. From an early age, she dreamed of a career in the arts. She drew well and loved the stage, imagining herself working in television or theater. Despite her attractive appearance, Lisa often feels self-conscious. Even so, she steadily affirmed herself in the beauty industry, modeling for many renowned cosmetics brands. Her family, however, was her main priority. She married while in college and soon became pregnant, giving birth to a daughter named Jessica. Those close to Lisa know she wants to achieve greatness. She continued modeling for a long time after Jessica's birth. Photographers described her as bright, cheerful, and energetic, with big plans for the future. Determined to pursue her ambitions, she divorced her husband, left Jessica in his care, and set off to conquer Hollywood. But Hollywood brought many disappointments. Lisa found a few odd jobs, but was mostly rejected. She then moved to Nashville, where she continued to work actively, this time in writing and film. She wrote a stage play and several books, including children's books. Her work led her to meet a man named Christ Koulis, who seemed just as ambitious. After high school, Christ had gone straight to medical school, completed a hospital internship in Toronto, and opened his own plastic surgery practice. His focus was entirely on career success. Christ worked hard and had his own private practice by age 30. Lisa learned about him when she saw a flyer in a restaurant restroom offering a free consultation. Interested in improving her appearance, she decided to visit him. At the appointment, Christ immediately noticed Lisa's beauty and was surprised when she wanted to have facial plastic surgery. After that first meeting in 2000, they began dating. Lisa's self-criticism makes her relationship with Christ, "is a plastique surgeon," especially convenient. She can get his services for free. Christ performed multiple procedures on Lisa, including breast augmentation, eyelid, forehead, and lip surgeries, liposuction, Botox, collagen injections, and more. The list grew long. She couldn't stop. Her family believed the push for these procedures didn't come from her alone, that Christ encouraged and manipulated her, playing on her insecurities. At the time, Lisa's loved ones had mixed feelings about Christ. The relationship lasted several years, though they didn't live together. Christ left Ohio for a year for work. Lisa, living in Tennessee at the time, decided to correct past mistakes and embrace motherhood. She obtained full custody of her daughter and devoted her free time to making up for lost years. According to Jessica, when Christ entered their lives, things initially felt carefree. He had a big house, and Lisa and Jessica moved in. Jessica had a spacious room with full amenities, and she excitedly told her friends about it. But problems soon emerged between Lisa and Christ. They often argued over trivial things, repeatedly breaking up and reconciling. This started to seem strange to Jessica. One day, she found her mother in the bathroom after a fall. Her mother was unconscious. Christ was there too, holding a suspicious syringe. He ignored Jessica's questions, shut the door, and wouldn't let her in. Despite her cries and knocking, Jessica never learned exactly what happened that day, but later formed troubling suspicions. After that incident, She paid closer attention and noticed that almost every call from Christ left her mother visibly upset. During this time, Lisa often told friends that Christ was extremely controlling. He demanded to know her every move, called whenever he could, and constantly asked who she was with and what she was doing. At first, Lisa mistook this for care and concern, but over time it became clear he was acting like a manipulative, possessive partner, especially when he exploded if she didn't answer the phone, even for valid reasons. This led to frequent conflicts. Outwardly, Christ was attractive, wealthy, and used his status to draw women's attention. About a year into the relationship, Lisa started watching him more closely, and with good reason. She repeatedly found incriminating emails and even dating site ads. She knew he was cheating, yet for reasons even she couldn't explain, she kept going back to him. For a while, Christ managed to hide his affairs, but not forever. He also regularly accused Lisa of sleeping around with other men. By 2002, they moved to Kentucky, reportedly because Christ was opening a new office. However, those who knew him suspected there was more to it. In 2001, several patients accused him of harassment during medical examinations. The move likely had as much to do with escaping rumors and repairing his reputation as it did with career growth. Within a month of relocating, Lisa noticed a new problem. Christ started using a prescription painkiller that affected the central nervous system, and he began abusing it. He injected himself, hallucinated, then tried other substances and became a regular user. At some point, Lisa also tried the drug, though the details are unclear, and quickly became dependent. Before long, both she and Christ were spending much of their free time under the influence of stimulants. Christ's family noticed and persuaded him to enter a rehab clinic in a neighboring state. They ignored the fact that Lisa was also addicted, and that Christ had supplied her, leaving her alone in a large house. Not long after Christ left for rehab, Lisa stopped answering calls. Her family went to check on her and found a disturbing scene. The house was in disarray, and she lay unconscious on a mattress, dirty, unkempt, and covered in bruises and sores. She was taken to the hospital, where doctors confirmed an overdose. She survived. The police got involved. Lisa told them Christ had gotten her hooked on prescription drugs, convincing her she was ill and needed them, and that she hadn't wanted to use them. Still, it was clear she kept using after he left. Her arms and legs were covered with injection marks, many infected. She explained that Christ went to rehab at his family's urging, while she, also severely addicted, was left without help. Christ's family later claimed they invited Lisa to go to rehab with Christ, but she refused. After Lisa told police her story, her parents sued him, and he temporarily lost his medical license in another state. He faced about 20 charges, including selling prescription drugs. Lisa entered a rehab center and slowly began to recover. After she was discharged from the hospital, Christ wrote a letter of apology, admitting he was responsible for her starting to use illegal substances. When his case went to court, Christ pled guilty to only one charge. The rest were dismissed. He received a short probation, served no jail time, and was allowed to continue working as a staff physician. Lisa's family believed his threats influenced the outcome. Lisa's family believed Christ Koulis manipulated her, warning that if she testified against him, she would lose custody of their daughter. They feared he might succeed. In the end, the prosecution's key witness, Lisa, pulled out of the hearing. By late 2002, the case was over. They don't break up. They stayed together in Franklin, Tennessee, which upset Lisa's family. Still, they accepted it because Lisa had stopped using substances. Things changed in 2005. Lisa decided to end the relationship. In early July, she met with her sister. They talked at length, and Lisa again said Christ was controlling and manipulative. Her sister noticed that she had improved a lot since quitting. She looked happy, smiled often, and said she had not relapsed. They agreed it was time for Lisa to leave her manipulative boyfriend. She chose July 4, Independence Day, to mark her own independence from Christ. Koulis, But within a day, she and Christ had made plans for a romantic weekend that Saturday and Sunday. This kind of back and forth wasn't unusual for them. On the afternoon of July 4, 2005, Christ called 911, saying Lisa was unwell. He reported that she had lost consciousness and he couldn't revive her. When paramedics arrived, Lisa was in critical condition and was rushed to the hospital. Doctors fought for more than an hour, but she died at age 35. The cause of death was a drug overdose. When asked what she had taken, Christ listed several medications, including a sedative and a painkiller. Christ said none of those drugs could have caused death, and he insisted Lisa was not injecting illegal substances as she had been. But signs quickly contradicted his account. The detectives searched their weekend lodge and found numerous related items, including several adult toys. Christ said they often used them during romantic weekends, but claimed things went wrong this time. Detectives also found prescription pills and dozens of syringes, some used and others preloaded with a powerful painkiller, much stronger and more addictive than the one prescribed to Lisa. This anesthetic was tightly controlled and difficult to obtain. The medical examiner found extensive injection damage, including injuries consistent with injections of crushed tablets and even lung damage from chronic use. Christ maintained he had been sober since rehab for 3 years and was enrolled in a voluntary 5-year monitoring program requiring 3 to 4 random urine tests per month, all of which were clean. In the house, investigators found only one painkiller pill, but numerous syringes, including ones prepared with crushed tablets mixed with water. Christ claimed Lisa hid her addiction by avoiding visible injection sites in her arms and legs. The autopsy confirmed she had been injecting in her groin, likely to conceal marks given her modeling career. Despite rehab, she had not stopped using. Still, the case wasn't straightforward. The drug at issue required a doctor's prescription and was extremely dangerous. Even a slight increase in dose could be fatal. Safe long-term use required close medical supervision, something Christ, as a physician, could provide. The autopsy indicated that Lisa received at least 3 injections of this drug during the weekend with Christ. Given these facts, Christ became the primary suspect. The question was, what exactly happened? 5 months into the investigation, he was arrested, posted bond, and was released pending trial. Prosecutors prepared for 2 years, but the evidence against him remains circumstantial. He faces up to 25 years in prison. The investigation determined that the weekend Lisa died was planned as a romantic getaway, which often included frequent intimacy. Authorities believe that Christ and Lisa had intimate relations multiple times while under the influence of an injected drug mixture. The alleged method was to crush painkiller tablets into a powder, dissolve them in water, and inject the solution for a stronger effect. However, no injection marks were found on Christ. During a search of the house, investigators found video recordings from the weekend. The videos showed Lisa holding a towel to her groin while Christ stood over her, saying the bleeding needed to be stopped. The defense argued that the video proved Lisa acted voluntarily. The prosecution saw it differently, asserting that Christ could have forced her to use the drug. Prosecutors claimed Christ administered the injections himself, making him culpable for murder on state law. They argued the video clearly showed Lisa was impaired and unable to resist. If Christ had wanted to kill her, they said, he could have done so easily. Christ maintained that Lisa had been addicted throughout their relationship and denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that Lisa had voluntarily used the banned substance and injected it into herself. He admitted that weekend, he prioritized his own pleasure over her well-being, but insisted he had not used the substance at that time and tried to stop her. According to him, Lisa continued regardless. He said he did not know where she had obtained the banned substance. The defense found this plausible, suggesting Lisa could have used her charm to acquire what she needed without Christ's help. They argued that finding a dealer of illegal substances would not be difficult. After 2002, although Christ was charged with the use of banned substances, he said he completed rehab and was clean. His family and friends supported this claim. He also said Lisa relapsed within weeks after her own rehabilitation. Afterward, she became discreet, carefully controlled her doses, and hid her use of banned substances from her relatives. She allegedly began injecting in less noticeable areas. The defense argued that the murder charge was unfounded and accused law enforcement of a mishandled investigation with multiple violations. Christ echoed this, saying detectives and forensic teams left the house in chaos. The defense also benefited from the fact that some syringes recovered from the home went missing. Prosecutors maintained the investigation followed protocol. The defense even challenged the cause of death. A prosecution witness, one of the attending physicians, testified that Lisa may have died not from overdose, but from the method of administration. Specifically, undissolved pill particles could have blocked her blood vessels, causing a fatal embolism, likely because the pill had not been finely crushed before injection. The prosecution argued this distinction did not matter because Christ supplied the pills, directly contributing to her death. Lisa's family insisted Christ was responsible and demanded justice. Her parents and sister describe how different she was before meeting him. Her sister insisted that she did not use illegal substances and that if she had, she would have confided in her. They had seen each other a few days before Lisa's death. She seemed well, looked healthy, and showed no signs of relapse. Lisa's family believes that Christ played a major role in her return to banned substances. They gave two possible motives. He used a banned substance to incapacitate her in order to satisfy his lust, or he intended to kill her because she wanted to end the relationship. Lisa and Christ discussed their separation in early July, and Lisa planned to end things on the day she died. Lisa's sister believes that Lisa and Christ argued again the weekend she planned to leave him. Unable to bear it any longer, she publicly announced that she would break up with him, but he was a skilled manipulator, and everything that followed seemed aimed at revenge. The provocative home videos recorded on Saturday and Sunday raised many questions. Both sides debated these clips at the hearing. The defense attorney correctly pointed out that there was no direct evidence that Lisa was involved in the use of controlled substances. Even the syringes found in her home did not have Christ's fingerprints, and the video shown to the jury did not depict a syringe in his hands. Christ claimed that, before he lost consciousness, Lisa said she felt pain in her arm and chest, symptoms that could resemble a heart attack. Christ, a doctor, admitted he was focused on his own pleasure at the time. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for a day and found him guilty of second-degree murder, unintentional killing, and criminal negligence. As a physician, he should have recognized that his partner was in distress and done everything possible to save her. There was also a real possibility Christ would avoid jail entirely. His family posted $500,000 bail, keeping him at home until trial, time that could count toward his sentence. His lawyers have sought legal loopholes, increasing the risk that he will only receive a suspended sentence. The jury ultimately concluded that Lisa injected herself. At sentencing, the judge stated that the evidence showed she intended to administer the deadly substance. Christ Koulis received a 2-year suspended sentence, leaving Lisa's family devastated. They believe Jesus intentionally killed Lisa, controlling and dominating her. Allegations, they argue, are supported by the videos, but there was no direct proof. Even the defense argued the videos did more harm than good. Lisa's sister and her daughter left the courtroom in tears. In interviews afterward, Lisa's daughter Jessica said she was in immense pain. She had lost her mother and felt justice had not been served. All Jessica could do was write a letter to the man she believed killed her mother. At 16, she wrote at length, accusing Christ of a crime he would not fully acknowledge or apologize for. Still, consequences followed. By 2010, 3 years after the trial, Christ Koulis had returned to practice, then he was found dead. The autopsy concluded he had developed bronchial pneumonia due to opiate intoxication. In plain terms, he died from a drug overdose. Lisa's family later spoke to reporters. Jessica called his death a punishment from above, what he deserved, even if the 2007 court decision said otherwise. Still, the question remains, was he truly responsible for Lisa's death? On the Costa Brava, a seemingly carefree holiday for young Federica Squarese suddenly turns into a never-ending nightmare. Just a few days after arriving, Federica mysteriously disappears amid the crowds and bustling lights of the city. When she is found, her body is roughly buried in the bushes, crudely concealed. A horrifying end to a trip filled with promise. How could a dream holiday lead to such a cruel death? And why did the perpetrator escape punishment? This is the story of Federica Squarese, the victim of a trip, a predator, and a flawed legal system. That case not only took the life of a young girl full of dreams, but also left a painful question that has never been satisfactorily answered when justice becomes too lenient. Is it any different from a second sentence for the victim and her family? In 2008, Federica Squarese was 23 years old and lived in San Giorgio delle Pertiche, a town of about 10,000 people in the province of Padova, Italy. She was known as a kind, straightforward young woman who got along easily with others. In June, she decided to go on holiday with her friend, Stefania Perin. The two had traveled together many times before. They trusted each other and agreed they would always look out for one another. For this trip, they chose Lloret de Mar in Spain, a lively seaside town known for its nightlife, beaches, and popular clubs. They finished their work week and headed to the Costa Brava near Barcelona. Excited for a long-anticipated vacation, Lloret de Mar was a favorite destination for young travelers seeking fun and freedom. The town was filled with European tourists, mostly students and couples, drawn by the festive atmosphere and scenic coast. After their flight, Federica and Stefania rested and settled in for 3 days. On the evening of June 30, 2008, they decided to go out. They planned to visit a familiar, well-known bar they considered safe. Dressed up for the evening, they went out together, had drinks, met a new group of people, and chatted. At some point, they became separated. As usual, they had a backup plan. If they lost each other, they would meet back at their hotel room. Stefania eventually returned to the hotel alone. She had had quite a bit to drink and fell asleep, assuming Federica would come back shortly. But the next morning, when she woke up, Federica was still not there. Realizing her friend had not returned from the club, she tried calling her mobile, but every call went to voicemail. This was alarming. By then, all the bars and clubs had long since closed, and Federica was not the type to stay out with strangers. She knew no one in the city and was generally cautious. Stefania thought the only place Federica might have gone was the beach. She had once mentioned wanting to see the sunrise there. Stefania searched along the coast, but found no trace of Federica. Trying not to panic, she called Federica's parents, hoping they might know something. Federica's parents were worried when they saw that their daughter had not returned, so they immediately called the police. They reported their child missing and provided all the information that Stefania had given them. The police took the case seriously. Although Federica was an adult and had gone out to enjoy the nightlife, her disappearance was out of character, which concerned everyone. They began the search without delay. They first gathered background information. Federica came from a modest, respected family and was the youngest of 4 children. She had an older sister and 2 brothers. She was calm, diligent, and focused on her studies. Although attractive and well-liked, her personal life was not her priority. Family and education came first. She excelled at school and graduated with honors in design. Even as a student, she dreamed of opening her own business, but wanted to gain experience first. After graduating, she took a job with the administration in her hometown. At work, colleagues spoke very highly of Federica, especially praising her seriousness and punctuality. She devoted all her free time to her job and never disappeared without a serious reason. Her relative described her as cautious, not inclined to take risks, positive, a bit naive, yet always calm. Trips, like traveling to Spain with a friend, were her favorite way to relax. Federica enjoyed traveling with friends and had visited nearly all major resorts in Italy and Spain. Her parents worried that, because of her attractiveness, Traveling alone might draw unwanted attention from men. To the investigators, Federica was a cheerful, principled girl, not prone to reckless behavior and not addicted to banned substances or alcohol. Very responsible, she had never vanished before, which made her disappearance even more alarming. Early on, investigators considered the possibility that a stranger might have taken advantage of her sincerity and naivety. Witnesses stated that Federica and Stefania arrived in the Costa Brava on June 27. They had been there only a few days when Federica disappeared during the night of June 30 to July 1. While the police were gathering information, Federica's family took action. Her parents contacted authorities in both Spain and Italy to raise awareness and accelerate the search. They provided detailed information and photographs to law enforcement in both countries and appealed to the public on television. While her parents shared the story of her disappearance, her brother and sister traveled to Spain to collaborate directly with the Catalan police. However, they soon returned because authorities resisted outside involvement. The police were already actively pursuing leads. Stefania, Federica's friend, provided the most useful information. She said they spent that evening at a bar near their hotel, about a 5 to 10 minute walk away. They had visited the place once before. Shortly after arriving, to have a drink and recover from the flight, even during their brief time there, they drew the attention of a group of Italian tourists. They also met 2 Argentine bartenders who worked at the bar. Police immediately visited the bar and spoke to the staff. The bartenders confirmed that Federica had been there on the night she disappeared. She and Stefania had a few drinks and chatted with the staff. Witnesses said Federica stayed for several hours. After midnight, a man, apparently Latino, joined her until about 2 a.m. She continued drinking with him, but showed no interest in him, while he remained fixated on her and kept bothering her. Around 3 a.m., she was preparing to leave. She and Stefania had already separated by then. The man suggested a nightclub across the street called Yates, a popular hangout in the area. CCTV footage corroborated the bartender's account. The young man was with Federica. They talked and had a few drinks, and then he followed her out of the bar. Nearby surveillance cameras captured both of them heading toward the Yates Club. Thanks to video recordings and witness statements, it was possible to find out that the person accompanying Federica was Victor Diaz Silva, a 28-year-old Uruguayan, known to close friends as El Gordo. Victor was working illegally as a waiter. He had arrived in Spain just a few days before Federica disappeared and was living in the town of Lloret de Mar. Security footage showed Federica entering a club with him, but they left shortly afterward and headed toward the coast. From that point, there were no more surveillance cameras, so the two of them disappeared from view. No one at the second venue knew Federica well, so nothing unusual was noted about their behavior. Witnesses provided no useful information, but Victor quickly became a person of interest. Federica disappeared right after meeting him. Officers returned to the bar to learn more from the staff. They reported that Victor had visited several times before Federica went missing, but after his last visit, when he spoke with her, he never returned. This suggested he might be hiding. Staff couldn't say exactly where he lived, but believed he resided in Spain. Detectives prioritized finding him and conducted extensive interviews. Eventually, they located Victor. He appeared to lead an ordinary life. He denied any involvement in Federica's disappearance, though his behavior raised concerns. One detective noticed suspicious scratches on his hands. He claimed a house cat had scratched him while playing. With no evidence to contradict him, police had to accept his explanation for the moment. He provided a DNA sample and was released. He also joined the search efforts, stating that after leaving the club, he walked Federica toward the beach, where she met a group of young people she seemed to know. He said he then went home and never saw her again. Investigators shifted focus to Federica's acquaintances, people she might have met in the bar, after arriving in Spain, but this yielded no results. The search continued for about a week, until July 7, 2008, when a witness reported finding a body in a public park in Lloret de Mar. Emergency services arrived and discovered human remains in an advanced state of decomposition, located off the main paths in a secluded area. The body had been covered with branches and leaves, suggesting an attempt to conceal it. The deceased was a young, unclothed woman, with no personal items nearby to aid identification. A local man walking his dogs found the body. Unusually, he had changed his usual route, and his dogs became agitated and led him to the remains. Because of the advanced decomposition and the lack of clothing or belongings, identification was difficult. However, a tattoo on the ankle was still visible, and the forensic expert noted a small diamond set into a tooth. These features matched descriptions of Federica provided by her friend Stefania and later by her parents, who confirmed the similarity to Federica Squarice. Definitive identification took longer due to the poor condition of the remains. After a week in the heat, the body was severely decomposed and infested with insects. Laboratory analysis revealed that Federica had been abused and murdered. The forensic expert concluded that Federica died a few hours before dawn on the night she disappeared, within about an hour of leaving the club with Victor. This strengthened suspicion against him. Investigators explored multiple hypotheses and conducted toxicology tests. The blood alcohol level at the time of death was not high enough to cause fatal intoxication or to prevent her from reaching her hotel on her own. Unfortunately, due to the decomposition, the exact cause of death could not be determined. The investigation progressed slowly. They ruled out a drug overdose and found no cuts, stab wounds, or gunshot injuries. The most likely cause appeared to be strangulation, a theory supported by the discovery of her underwear lodged in her throat. Unfortunately, the condition of the remains made it impossible to identify handprints on the neck or fingerprint-shaped bruises on the throat. Initially, the results of the autopsy and investigation were kept secret. The only leaked detail, fueling rumors, was the estimated time of death, determined by the number and activity of maggots on the body. After Federica's family learned of her death, her brother and sister returned to Spain. They vowed to follow the case closely and were outraged that the police were concealing information. They feared that this secrecy could cost valuable leads, witnesses, or even allow the perpetrator to escape. Although the family pressured investigators, it had little effect. Because of multiple examinations, the body remained in the medical examiner's office for a long time and was released to the family only on July 17. The body was then transported from Spain to Italy. On Saturday the 19th, about 1,000 people gathered at the parish church of San Giorgio delle to observe a minute of silence and lay flowers. Many offered condolences and shared warm memories of a bright young woman whose life was cut short. Despite the police silence, the murder at the Spanish resort became widely known. Thanks to the family's efforts, the case drew intense attention and was discussed in both Spain and Italy. Journalists pursued every angle and repeatedly approached the family for information. As a result, Federica's parents barred journalists from the funeral. No photographers or videographers were allowed inside the church, though reporters waited outside, hoping for comments. Mourners carried posters with Federica's smiling photo and accompanied the cortege through the town. After the funeral, her friends held a torchlight vigil. The town council declared a day of mourning. Public demand for justice grew, and outrage spread across both countries over the killing of a foreign national. People began questioning the safety of living in and traveling to Spain, criticizing the tourist police for failing to protect visitors and condemning law enforcement for prolonged secrecy. Partial leaks only increased public anger. Many were convinced that Victor was involved and wondered why he hadn't been arrested. Police shared the suspicion but initially lacked the evidence to detain him. At first, with no body and no proof that Federica had been harmed, they justified their restraint under procedure. They also failed to inform the public that they had lost track of the prime suspect, Victor. After the body was found, Victor went from witness to prime suspect in the murder and abuse. The detectives tried to find him again, but he had fled the city. His whereabouts were unknown. Since he had provided a DNA sample, authorities needed laboratory results to confirm or rule out their suspicions. While the lab processed the evidence, police intensified the manhunt. Evidence suggested he was on the run but still nearby. While hiding, Victor told several acquaintances that he had done something wrong, excusing himself by saying anyone can make a mistake. To avoid capture, he changed his hairstyle and clothes, and walked around carrying a Bible, pretending to be a monk. He was eventually arrested in Tarragona. After his arrest, Victor was taken to the station for questioning. At first, he was nervous and uncooperative, but eventually broke down. He asked for a Bible and then said he wanted to confess. According to Victor, he spent the night of Federica's disappearance with her. After leaving the club, he expressed a desire to be intimate with her, and she agreed immediately. He then asked her to be his girlfriend, but she suddenly changed her attitude, refused, and allegedly planned to report him for abuse. Frightened, he grabbed her by the throat to scare her. He claims he then heard a voice in his head telling him to kill her. Victor choked her for several minutes until she showed no signs of life. He then dragged her about 100 meters off the hiking trail by her feet, covered the body with branches and leaves, and placed large stones on top. He denied abusing her, insisting the intimacy was consensual. However, those who knew Federica considered his account a lie. Stefania was sure that someone like Victor would never be able to attract Federica. Federica was not interested in men like him and never started relationships with people she didn't know well. Stefania believes that abuse may have been the motive for the murder and that Federica would never have threatened him or reported him to the police if the abuse had been voluntary. When these details became public, outrage toward the police grew. Not only had they nearly let the criminal slip away, but the authorities' inaction was infuriating. Despite significant evidence and a confession, Spanish authorities were slow to start the trial. The process was lengthy, and Federica's family feared that the killer would not be punished. Under Spanish law, if the trial did not begin by June 10, 2012, Victor could have been released. Since pre-trial detention is limited to 2 years from the date of arrest, to pressure the authorities, Federica's family and friends sent dozens of requests and letters to the Spanish government to prevent his release. The trial was finally scheduled for the fall of 2011, perhaps in large part due to the persistence of Federica's family and other supporters. The prosecution assembled enough evidence and testimony to present its version of events. They argued that Victor met Federica at a bar party and tried to pursue her. His intention was to abuse her, but she had not had enough alcohol to lose control. Around 2:00 a.m., she left the club to return to her hotel. Victor tried to pressure her into enduring the abuse, even suggesting they go elsewhere so she could drink more. But to no avail. At 3:45 a.m., Federica rejects Victor and goes to see Stefania. Unable to handle the rejection, he followed her. In a secluded area, he attacked her, dragged her into a park, and abused her. She resisted, as shown by defensive-type injuries on her body and hands, which the forensic expert noted. Despite advanced decomposition, skin particles under her nails matched Victor's DNA, as did biological fluids collected from her body. She had a broken tooth from being struck, and he then strangled her. Later, the police disclosed further findings that revealed even greater brutality. Victor apparently lacked the strength to strangle Federica to death. She lost consciousness, but was still alive. To eliminate the only witness, he stuffed her underwear down her throat. He pleaded insanity, claiming he heard voices and suffered mental disorders. However, a psychiatric evaluation conducted before trial found him competent, and there was no record of any diagnosed mental illness. The prosecution found his account implausible. They believed Victor was trying to lessen his responsibility to receive a shorter sentence or be sent to a clinic instead of prison. His guilt was indisputable, but since Spain has no life imprisonment, the prosecution requested the maximum possible term based on the charges, 30 years. Victor tried to mitigate this punishment by apologizing to Federica's family, but to no avail. In late November 2011, the court issued its verdict. Victor Diaz Silva was sentenced to 5 years in prison for cruelty and abuse, and 16 years and 3 months in prison for murder, suspended after serving 2/3 of the total time. In all, his sentence totaled 17 years and 9 months. He was also ordered to pay 250,000 euros in compensation to Federica's parents. The judge considered mitigating factors, such as his cooperation with investigators, counting his confession as such, so the sentence was below the maximum. Appeals followed. but the Madrid Supreme Court upheld the ruling. In 2020, Victor requested extradition to Uruguay to serve his sentence there, but the request was denied. While incarcerated, he kept busy, meeting women through correspondence. Federica's family was outraged by what they considered a lenient ending. Not knowing that it would be even lenient, after serving 2/3 of his sentence, Spanish law entitled him to semi-freedom. Because he behaved as a model prisoner, he effectively secured release. He now lives in Zaragoza, has a job, and married one of the women he met through letters. He remains under police supervision, regularly checking in at the local station, and is subject to certain restrictions that have little impact on his daily life. Full release and the lifting of all restrictions are expected on March 31, 2026. Federica's family has repeatedly expressed concern and dissatisfaction. The case continued to attract attention online. Politicians in Italy and Spain have spoken out in support of Federica's family and pushed for law reforms to impose harsher penalties on violent crimes. They cited Federica's case and other incidents involving the deaths of tourists in Spain, noting that relatively mild punishments are common in such cases. Unfortunately, no significant reforms have been enacted so far. Around 2:00 a.m., Houston police officers arrived at a 2-story house on Houston Street. Outside, illuminated by a street lamp, were 2 teenagers, a young man and a young woman. Neither of them spoke. The girl was crying, her face stained with tears and her eyes puffy. The boy was calm, and his expression was difficult to read. The police didn't immediately ask for specifics. One officer inquired about the alarm. The young man looked up, went to the keypad, and pressed a button. The house didn't obviously look like a crime had occurred there. The night was calm, and inside the house was neat and silent. There was no sign of a struggle. But as the officers ascended the staircase, a heavy tension built. One door upstairs stood slightly ajar. From inside came faint, labored breaths, raspy, uneven, interrupted by sharp inhales. There were no screams, no movement. The officers pushed the door open. The bedroom light was off. Their flashlights swept across the room and landed on 2 figures in bed, their heads covered with pillows. Neither stirred at the intrusion. When an officer cautiously lifted the pillow covering the woman, he recoiled. She was already gone. 2 bullet wounds to the head, the blood seeping deep into the fabric beneath her. Beside her lay a man, still alive, but barely. He did not respond to their voices, nor did he open his eyes. He had also been shot in the head. The bullet had not passed through, leaving him in a critical condition, conscious but unable to speak. After several hours of resuscitation efforts, he was declared dead. The scene was eerily calm. No weapon was in sight. The room itself showed little disturbance, only a small hole in the ceiling and a dark stain spreading across the wall. The alarm system had never sounded, and the rest of the house bore no signs of forced entry or violence. Downstairs, silence hung heavy. Outside, the 2 teenagers waited. One of them was the son of the victims. He had already given his version of events, but as police soon discovered, not all of his statements matched what they had found inside. The air grew heavier. Suspicion began to take shape. Antonio Armstrong Sr. was born in Houston when his mother, Kay Winston, was just 15 years old. Shortly after, she married a man who already had 5 children from a previous relationship. Together, they built a blended family where Kay later gave birth to 3 more kids. Despite the challenges, she worked hard to treat all the children equally. Christian faith was central to their household. From an early age, Antonio showed exceptional athletic ability. After high school in Houston, he enrolled at the University of Texas, where he played football at a high level. His mother cheered him on at every game. Following college, Antonio was drafted by the Miami Dolphins before continuing his career in Canada with the BC Lions and later the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Injuries eventually ended his professional football journey, and he returned home to Houston. Antonio's life remained deeply rooted in faith. After retiring from football, he became an assistant pastor at the very church where he had grown up. It was there that he met Dawn, a devoted member of the congregation who was admired for her kindness and active involvement. On July 14, 1998, the two married. Together, they built not only a family but also a business, First Class Training, a chain of gyms that eventually expanded to 3 locations across Houston. Antonio also began a YouTube channel where he shared motivational messages. Before marrying Antonio, Dawn had a son named Josh. He was outgoing, kind, and athletic. Antonio legally adopted Josh, raising him as his own son, who was now registered as Josh Armstrong. Antonio and Dawn later welcomed 2 more children, Antonio Jr., known as AJ, and their youngest, a daughter named Kyra. AJ grew up calm, disciplined, and physically active. From a young age, his parents encouraged him in sports, and he thrived on his high school football team, following in his father's footsteps. His upbringing emphasized structure, faith, and hard work. Though Josh and AJ were stepbrothers, they always referred to one another simply as brothers. Kyra, the youngest, grew up in a secure and stable environment, enjoying the benefits of the family's growing success. By 2016, Dawn and Antonio were living with their 2 youngest children, AJ and Kyra, in a home on Palmetto Street in Houston. Their oldest son, Josh, then 20, had recently moved out, renting a place just 2 minutes away. He was attending the Art Institute of Houston, pursuing a future in music. AJ, at 16, there was a high school student preparing for advanced placement courses. While 12-year-old Kyra had just begun middle school, all 3 children maintained close ties with their grandmother, Kay, visiting her several times each week. To outsiders, the Armstrongs appeared to be the very definition of a successful, close-knit family. Faith was at the heart of the Armstrong household. This family is very active in church. At home, discipline and structure guided daily life. Dawn was meticulous in keeping routines, monitoring homework, enforcing curfews, organizing meals, and managing free time. Every child has chores, and being late, hiding things, or skipping school is not acceptable. Antonio emphasized academics and athletics, believing sports instilled discipline and character. In his early school years, AJ had been polite, diligent, and well-behaved. But as he grew older, cracks began to show: missed assignments, tardiness, and small disciplinary issues. Josh, the older brother, began visiting less frequently, and his conversations with his siblings grew sparse. Although Dawn and Antonio never openly distinguished between their biological and stepchildren, their relationship with Josh became more and more distant over time. He longed for independence. Kyra, the youngest, was her mother's focus. Dawn parented with both strictness and care, monitoring her daughter's academics, friendships, and even digital life. She and Antonio also regularly checked their children's phones, read messages, and track locations. Any suspicion of disobedience led to consequences. Dawn kept detailed notes on AJ's behavior in her phone and often discussed strategies with Antonio about how to handle him. The Armstrong household ran under near total parental oversight. After discovering Antonio and Dawn in their upstairs bedroom, investigators began a thorough sweep of the house, with particular focus on signs of forced entry. They found no signs of forced entry. The windows were locked, the glass intact, and the doors showed no evidence of tampering. The home security system, linked to Dawn's cell phone, recorded every arming, disarming, and/or activity. On the night of the crime, the system was armed at 12:52 a.m. and disarmed at 1:40 a.m. The exact moment a call was placed to 911. During that interval, no doors or windows had been opened. Investigators concluded that only someone inside the house, or someone with the alarm code, could have disabled the system. There were no reports of visitors that night, and no spare keys were unaccounted for. On the first floor, a kitchen drawer, where a Smith & Wesson .22 caliber handgun was normally stored, was pulled completely open, but empty. The weapon was later recovered in a downstairs closet near the staircase. Beside it was a torn piece of paper with a message scrawled in French. "I've been watching you for a long time. Follow me." The handwriting was shaky, the letters uneven, and the sheet bore no fingerprints or identifying marks. Investigators could not determine its origin. In AJ's third-floor bedroom, officers also noticed a strange mark on the ceiling, a bullet hole that appeared to have been fired upward at close range. The angle and trajectory suggested an odd scenario, but the bullet itself was never recovered, leaving yet another unanswered question. The Armstrong home was outfitted with a modern security system, including motion sensors that tracked movement between floors. According to the system's log, after 1:24 a.m., the only activity recorded came from the second floor near the parents' bedroom. No movement was detected on the third floor, where the children's rooms were located. This directly conflicted with AJ's account. He claimed that after hearing gunshots, he went downstairs to investigate. The system showed no such movement. Kaira, AJ's sister, showed police her room and explained that she had been startled awake by a loud noise, but chose to remain in bed, never opening her door or leaving her room. To eliminate the possibility of an outside intruder, investigators brought in a K9 unit to detect any unfamiliar scent trails. The dogs found no foreign human scent leading from any entrance of the house. All confirmed movement remained inside the residence. Investigators noted that the gap between the last logged activity and the system being shut off was less than 15 minutes. In that narrow window, an intruder would have had to break in, commit the murders, and leave without tripping alarms or leaving a trace, an almost impossible feat. For detectives, this suggested that if the system had been deactivated, it was done from the inside. The following day, 16-year-old Antonio A.J. Armstrong Jr. was brought to the police station for questioning because he was a minor. His grandmother, Kay, was present throughout the interview. The recorded footage from that session would later become a pivotal part of the case. From the start, AJ's demeanor raised red flags. Without being accused of anything, he repeated the phrase, "I didn't do it," 19 times. His tone was calm, almost detached, and he often seemed distracted, glossing over critical details. Officers noted that, at no point, did he ask about his parents' condition or express concern for their well-being. During a second interview, his demeanor didn't change. He showed no signs of shock, never asked to call relatives, and didn't bring up funeral arrangements. To investigators, his lack of emotional response stood out. It wasn't the reaction they expected from a teenager who had just lost both parents in a brutal attack. Although AJ wasn't arrested at that stage, he quickly became the focal point of the investigation. Detectives began looking deeper into his behavior, his circle of friends, and possible tensions within the family. Over time, cracks began to appear in the perfect son image. Aj's grades had slipped, and he had started hiding things from his parents. Investigators uncovered that he was secretly maintaining a second phone, which he used to communicate with a girlfriend his parents disapproved of. Dawn Armstrong had tried to monitor his behavior, blocking apps and limiting his access to her. But AJ found ways around it. When police searched AJ's room after the murders, they discovered a marijuana wrapper hidden in his underwear drawer. On his phone, they found text messages discussing banned substances, photos of homemade joints, and chats about buying it. These discoveries painted a far more complicated picture of AJ. One, his parents either hadn't fully realized or had chosen to overlook. A few months before the tragedy, an incident with his father's car foreshadowed the growing strain within the Armstrong household. While his parents were away, AJ took Antonio's white Infiniti without permission. The car was later discovered damaged, the wheel and frame bent after striking a curb. The repair bill was steep, but the family chose to keep the matter private. Antonio confronted his son in a serious conversation. and the episode left him considering drastic options: either transferring AJ to a different school or sending him to live with his grandmother, Kay. In hopes that stricter discipline might restore order, tensions in the household escalated in the weeks that followed. AJ increasingly viewed the rigid rules at home as suffocating. His mother, Dawn, monitored nearly every aspect of his daily life, from academics to social interactions. In private conversations with friends, AJ described the environment as controlling and invasive. The more restrictions mounted, the greater his frustration grew. Josh Armstrong, AJ's older half-brother, lived a very different life. At 20, he was no longer in the home, but only minutes away in a rental apartment. His years in college were turbulent, marked by cycles of dropping out, re-enrolling, and struggling to find stability. Behind closed doors, Josh battled anxiety, depression, and episodes of paranoia. Medical records revealed that he experienced hallucinations, panic attacks, and spells of emotional detachment from reality. One psychiatric evaluation even noted his obsessive fear that electronic devices were monitoring him. His doctors diagnosed a severe mental health disorder requiring consistent medication. 2 months before the murders, Josh was involved in a disturbing incident at the Armstrong family home. According to reports, he set fire to a blanket near the entrance of the house. The blaze was quickly extinguished before causing serious damage, but it deeply alarmed his family. Dawn immediately took him to a hospital for psychiatric evaluation, and doctors prescribed antipsychotic medication, yet no one followed up to ensure that he was taking it. Both Kara and their grandmother later recalled seeing Josh lingering near the home in the weeks afterward, acting strangely and avoiding conversation. Despite this alarming behavior, Josh was largely overlooked in the investigation that followed the murders. He was never formally questioned in the days immediately after the crime. No fingerprints, no DNA samples, and no official verification of his whereabouts that night were ever collected. To the defense, this became a glaring oversight. A young man with a history of instability, recent violent behavior, and close proximity to the home was never treated as a suspect, or even as a key witness. Kay, the Armstrongs' grandmother, later told investigators that on the day of the murders, Josh seemed detached and unresponsive. He sat silently in a chair, staring blankly at the wall, offering little more than short, evasive answers when spoken to. His medical history included past episodes of aggression and his own life ideation. Twice, he had been placed under outpatient psychiatric observation, with doctors recommending constant supervision and treatment. Each time, however, the communication with medical professionals stopped shortly after his release. To this day, questions linger over whether Josh's proximity, medical history, and prior fire-setting incident should have made him a focus of inquiry. Investigators placed nearly all their attention on AJ. 7 years later, the prosecution unveiled what they claimed was a critical piece of evidence implicating AJ: a single drop of blood, identified as Antonio Sr.'s, found on a t-shirt collected from the crime scene in 2016. AJ's clothing had been collected on the day of the murders, sealed in a transparent evidence bag, and logged according to protocol. At the time, officers conducted a visual inspection and recorded no traces of blood. For years, the bag sat in storage, untouched and untested. Only in 2023, just months before a third trial was set to begin, an officer reviewing the file claimed to have noticed a suspicious discoloration beneath the label on the t-shirt packaging. When re-examined under laboratory conditions, a small, reddish-brown stain was indeed discovered beneath the evidence tag, pressed against the fabric near the collar. Forensic testing confirmed the presence of DNA matching Antonio Armstrong Sr. The drop was minuscule, barely 2 millimeters in size, yet it instantly became the prosecution's most powerful weapon. The defense questioned the reliability of the evidence. They pointed out that this important piece of evidence had been overlooked for 7 years, even though investigators, forensic experts, and lawyers had examined it multiple times. Its location was also strange. The bloodstain was underneath a factory tag that seemed undisturbed, with sharp edges and undamaged glue. Records showed the evidence bag hadn't been opened since 2016. For the stain to be under the tag, it would have had to be there from the start. If that were the case, how could everyone who previously inspected the evidence have missed it? Suspicion spread quickly. AJ's attorneys suggested the possibility of contamination, or worse, evidence tampering. After 2 mistrials, they argued, the state's case had grown thin, and just as a 3rd trial loomed, a mysterious new discovery emerged. They demanded an independent review of the evidence and full access to the storage facility's chain of custody records. The records themselves raised further questions. In the years following the crime, AJ's clothing and other items had been shuffled between departments, with responsibility for storage changing hands multiple times. Prosecutors dismissed this as a clerical oversight, insisting the evidence had remained secure. But doubt lingered. The blood's location also sparked heated debate. It was found inside the shirt, near the collar, positioned in a way that suggested close proximity to the victim when the fatal shot was fired. The state argued this placed AJ at the scene of Antonio's murder. The defense countered that no forensic analysis could conclusively explain how or when the trace had landed there. To them, the mystery surrounding the stain was more damning to the prosecution's credibility than to AJ himself. Despite these uncertainties, the blood stain became the centerpiece of the case. For the prosecution, it was the long-awaited breakthrough. For the defense, it symbolized systemic failure. The Armstrong case soon grew into one of the longest and most polarizing criminal proceedings in Houston history. Over nearly a decade, 3 separate trials unfolded, each drawing national media coverage and sparking fierce public debate about evidence, justice, and the fallibility of the system itself. The first trial began in 2019, 3 years after Antonio and Dawn's deaths. Prosecutors argued that the killings could only have been committed from inside the house, and that AJ was the only person with both access and opportunity. Yet the defense dismantled much of this narrative. The murder weapon bore no fingerprints. AJ's clothing showed no blood at the time, and investigators had failed to fully probe the potential involvement of Josh, his mentally unstable half-brother. After weeks of testimony, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. The case ended in a mistrial. The second trial took place in 2022. Both sides relied on largely the same evidence, though with slightly different emphases. Prosecutors focused more heavily on AJ's seemingly irrational behavior, appealing to the jury's emotions. The defense repeated its argument that the investigation had been one-sided and that AJ's older brother, Josh, who had reportedly struggled with mental health issues, was overlooked as a potential suspect. Once again, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision, and the proceedings ended in a second mistrial. The third trial was held in August 2023. By that time, prosecutors introduced what they described as a critical new piece of evidence, a minuscule blood stain found on AJ's T-shirt. Though the shirt had been collected in 2016, the stain was only identified years later when forensic testing was repeated with updated methods. This finding became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Prosecutors argued that the presence of the blood indicated AJ was in close proximity to his father at the time of the shooting. They also cited data from the home's alarm system and motion detectors, insisting no intruder could have committed the crime without disabling the system from inside. The defense countered by accusing investigators of mishandling or even manipulating the evidence. Despite the ongoing disputes, the jury returned a guilty verdict. After 7 years and 3 trials, AJ, whose real name is Antonio Armstrong Jr., was convicted of murdering his parents and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Under the United States criminal justice system, a conviction requires proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, a fundamental principle of American law. Reasonable doubt means that if jurors have any justifiable uncertainty about the defendant's guilt, they are obliged to acquit. In AJ's case, many observers argued that this standard was not met. No direct evidence tied him to the crime. The murder weapon, his father's gun, contained no fingerprints from AJ. There were no signs of a struggle, and the blood stain on his shirt, though pivotal to the verdict, had not been reported until 7 years after the murders. Much of the prosecution's case rested on AJ's behavior following the incident and on statements that prosecutors described as inconsistent. Investigators also overlooked potentially important details. Not all biological evidence from the home was tested. No fingerprint analysis was carried out on the doors, and the windows were not examined for microscopic traces that might suggest forced entry. Portions of the alarm system's log were missing or corrupted, and no independent forensic audit was ever conducted on the system. Josh, AJ's brother, was never called to testify, and his alibi was never formally verified. He was never treated as a suspect, though no official explanation was given for this decision. A note found near Dawn Armstrong's body was never subjected to handwriting or DNA analysis, nor was it used to expand the scope of the investigation. Across all three trials, the evidence remained essentially the same. No new suspects were investigated, and no fresh lines of inquiry were pursued. Instead, jurors were repeatedly asked to interpret AJ's demeanor and behavior. Emotional framing often took the place of concrete proof. Ultimately, the guilty verdict rested more on interpretation than on irrefutable facts. The principle of reasonable doubt is designed to prevent wrongful convictions when evidence is uncertain. In Antonio's case, guilt was never definitively established. Yet the court decided to conclude the case instead of admitting that simply having doubts doesn't prove someone is innocent or guilty. Following his conviction, AJ did not remain silent. From prison, he gave multiple interviews to journalists and independent creators, reflecting on the case and his family while continuing to assert his innocence. He described his home life as complicated but never abusive. He admitted to normal teenage clashes with his parents over discipline and rules, but stressed that he admired his father and leaned on his mother for guidance. AJ insists that he loves his parents and insists that he could never kill them. One of the main themes in AJ's statements is his sharp criticism of the investigation. He claims detectives targeted him from the very beginning, ignoring other possibilities. AJ has said he still hopes for a future appeal and is prepared to fight for his name. No matter how long it takes, he believes justice can only be served if the case is re-examined without bias and with the help of independent experts. In one interview, AJ made a striking comment. If his father had survived, he would have revealed the truth. AJ believes Antonio Sr. would have defended him, stood by his side, and prevented the family from being torn apart. To AJ, that belief feels like his last plea for trust. Kate met AJ after his arrest. Their relationship began during the investigation, and she knew exactly what she was stepping into. Despite the accusations, she believed he was innocent. They started by writing letters, later seeing each other during supervised visits, and eventually they got married. Their marriage was legally registered while AJ was still awaiting trial. A year later, they had a son. Kate now raises him on her own. His only connection to his father is through photographs, brief phone calls, and short video messages from prison. Kate says her life is built around waiting for court hearings, for paperwork, for appeals. Her daily routine is a balancing act of working, raising their son, responding to the media, and preparing legal documents. In interviews, she insists she doesn't allow herself to get tired. In her words, if she gives up, AJ will remain trapped in the system forever. Her faith is what keeps both him and their family going, but the pressure has always been there. Public opinion is divided, and Kate has received hostile messages accusing her of blind loyalty or defending a killer. Still, she remains certain that the truth will come out. For her, the only real danger is doing nothing. She refuses to see herself as a victim. Instead, she believes her role is to ensure this story does not end in silence. What if AJ really didn't pull the trigger? If so, then who entered the house, bypassed the alarm system, ignored the children, and fired the fatal shots? Or was that person already inside? On the night of February 3, 2003, at the House of Blues in Los Angeles, Lana Clarkson met Phil Spector, the legendary music producer, who was once praised as a genius with Wall of Sound and an icon of an entire era. That seemingly harmless encounter opened a chain of horrifying events. Just a few hours later, in the luxurious Pyrenees Castle Villa, Lana was found dead. A gunshot through the mouth ended her life. Outside, Phil trembled as he walked out the door, whispering that he thought he had killed someone. From a chance moment one night, the fates of both of them turned in two opposite directions. One lost his life. The other fell from the peak of legend straight into the abyss of crime. How could a fleeting encounter turn into a tragedy that shocked Hollywood? To fully understand that tragedy, we need to go back to the beginning, to the life of Lana Clarkson, a girl with an artistic dream, stepping into the glamorous but also pitfall-filled lights of Hollywood. Lana Clarkson was born on April 5, 1962, in Long Beach, a coastal city in Southern California. She was the daughter of Donna and James Clarkson and grew up with two siblings, Jesse and Fawn. She spent her childhood in Sonoma County, known for its rolling hills, meadows, and vineyards at the heart of California's wine country. Surrounded by nature, she enjoyed small-town warmth while dreaming big. Tragedy struck early when she lost her father, a loss that weighed heavily on the family. Christmas 1978 was particularly traumatic, and soon after, her family moved to Los Angeles. By then, Lana had finished high school, and her passion for the arts was clear. She wanted a life on stage and screen. Tall, striking, and charismatic, Lana seemed destined for entertainment, nearly 6 feet tall, with long legs, blonde hair, and clear eyes. She had a presence that drew people in. Friends described her as adventurous, warm, and free-spirited. By the early 1980 seconds, Lana was determined to build a career in acting and modeling. She began with small roles in television and film, often as an extra. It was a humble start, but one she believed in. During this time, she also volunteered. In 1982, she joined Project Angel Food, an act of courage during a time of heavy discrimination. Helping others was as much a part of her identity as acting. Lana made her official acting debut in 1982 with a small speaking role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, an iconic coming-of-age comedy. In 1983, she appeared briefly in Scarface, sharing a scene with Michelle Pfeiffer, a highlight for any aspiring actress. That same year, she starred in Deathstalker, a fantasy film that later gained a cult following. In 1985, Lana landed the role that defined her career, Amethea in Barbarian Queen, a fierce warrior who embodied both strength and sensuality. The film became a cult classic, and her performance made her a recognizable figure among fans of fantasy and B-movies. She went on to appear in projects like the sci-fi film Blind Date, directed by Nico Masterakis, and had smaller roles in Amazon, Women on the Moon, 1987, Beyond Film. She worked in television, commercials, and modeling, including campaigns for major brands like Mercedes-Benz. Her career took her across the United States and abroad to Japan, Greece, Argentina, Italy, Switzerland, France, Jamaica, and Mexico. Despite her talent and dedication, her career plateaued. She didn't achieve mainstream stardom, but she built a loyal fan base. Comic conventions kept her in the spotlight, where fans, many of whom first knew her as the Barbarian Queen, lined up for autographs and photos. She became an icon in her own right, leaving a lasting impression on a generation of fans. By the late 1990 seconds, Lana looked for new ways to connect with her audience. She launched her own website, sold autographed digital versatile disc, and engaged with fans on a message board. This provided income and a sense of community and appreciation. As Lana entered her 40 segundo, Hollywood became tougher. Roles dwindled, auditions led nowhere, and full-time acting was no longer sustainable. In January 2003, she took a part-time job as a hostess at the House of Blues in Los Angeles, a club known for live music and celebrity guests. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept her close to the entertainment world she loved. Her job was to welcome and care for high-profile guests, ensuring they felt at home in the VIP areas. On the night of February 3, 2003, Lana went to work as usual, unaware that this ordinary shift would mark the beginning of a tragedy. That evening, legendary record producer Phil Spector, one of the most famous figures in music, walked into the House of Blues. What started out as a seemingly harmless encounter quickly led to one of Hollywood's darkest tragedies. To understand how, we need to look at Phil Spector's past. His real name was Harvey Philip Spector, born on December 26, 1939, and raised in the Bronx, New York, in a Russian Jewish family. At the age of 9, Phil's life took a turn. On April 20, 1949, his father locked himself in a running car and died of carbon monoxide poisoning. The loss left a lasting wound. In 1953, his mother moved the family to Los Angeles, looking for a fresh start. By 19, Phil was in college and meeting others who shared his passion for music. He formed a group called the Teddy Bears, serving as guitarist and songwriter. He wrote, "To know him is to love him," inspired by words on his father's tombstone. Released in 1958, the song became a surprise hit, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 by December. The success didn't last. The Teddy Bears recorded more songs, but none matched their debut. By 1959, the group dissolved, and Phil withdrew for a time. He later returned to music, not as a performer, but as a producer. In the studio, he found his true calling. He partnered with 2 producers at a small label, Junior Records, but his ambition grew. In October 1962, he bought out his partners, took control, and founded Phillies Records. Under Phil's, he produced 21 singles, sold over 13 million copies, and earned 9 gold records. By age 21, Phil was a millionaire, worth more than $2 million, and a major force in American music. However, his talent also came with a dark side. Early in his producing career, he collaborated with stars like Elvis Presley and Roy Orbison. His knack for crafting hits quickly made him one of the industry's brightest young talents. The turning point came in 1963, when he introduced the Ronettes, sisters Ronnie and Estelle Bennett, and their cousin Nedra Talley, formerly known as the Darling Sisters. They underwent a complete transformation under Phil's leadership, both in image and sound, becoming one of the most recognizable acts of the 1960 seconds. Phil also unveiled his signature innovation, the wall of sound. This technique layered multiple instruments and vocals to create a dense, orchestral texture that filled the recording space. It sounded unlike anything before, big, immersive, and unmistakable. Cementing his reputation as a studio pioneer, many credit him with reshaping how popular music is produced and recorded. Over the years, Phil worked with the Ramones, Tina Turner, Cher, John Lennon, and George Harrison. John and George, both former Beatles, brought him in to rework unfinished material from the Get Back sessions. Songs that would become part of the album Let It Be. Having Phil on a project signaled prestige, but it came at a cost. Behind the fame was a darker side. He could be volatile, controlling, and dangerous. Partners later described him as abusive and manipulative, often carrying a gun to intimidate them. That behavior extended to the studio. Members of the Ramones said he once pulled a gun and fired shots during a session. Even John was shaken when Phil fired into the ceiling while they were recording. Phil's personal life was also troubled. He married twice and adopted 3 children, who later accused him of isolating them and forcing them into disturbing, inapropiados escenarios. He also had more children with another woman he never married. By the early 2010s, Phil's reputation mixed genius with chaos. He was hailed as a legend, but widely distrusted. On February 3, 2003, he went to the House of Blues in Los Angeles, where Lana Clarkson was working as a hostess. He arrived intoxicated with another woman. As Lana approached, She didn't recognize Phil right away. Some say she even mistook him for a woman, an insult to a man obsessed with power and recognition. Realizing her mistake, Lana tried to make amends and gave him extra attention. Despite the busy night, other accounts say she recognized him right away and was attentive because she thought he could help her career. Near closing, Phil invited Lana to his mansion for a drink. She agreed. His driver, Adriano de Souza, drove them to his 33-room hilltop estate, Pyrenees Castle. Arriving around 3 a.m., Lana and Phil went inside. Adriano, who spoke little English, waited in the car as instructed. Around 5 a.m., Adriano heard a sharp sound he believed was a gunshot. A few minutes later, Phil appeared at the door, unsteady and holding a pistol. According to Adriano, Phil said he thought he had killed someone. Panicked, Adriano called 911. When police arrived, they found Phil drunk, erratic, and refusing commands. After several tense minutes, officers entered the house and discovered Lana Clarkson dead, slumped in a white chair with blood on the fabric. She had been shot in the mouth. A gun lay near her left ankle. Phil immediately began changing his story. Although he had told Adriano he thought he had killed someone, he now claimed Lana had put the gun in her own mouth. He said at times it was an accident, that she kissed the gun and it went off, or that she intended to harm herself. None of these claims matched the evidence. Police arrested him. A search of the mansion found 8 additional guns and blood traces in a bathroom. The next day, February 4, 2003, Phil posted a $1 million bail. For a man of his wealth, it was easy, and he remained free for more than 6 years as the case moved through the courts. In 2006, a married Rachel Relly Short, someone close to him who knew his personal life well. Some believe the marriage was a strategy to prevent her from testifying against him, but the case proceeded anyway. The first trial began in March 2007. Phil Spector was charged with second-degree murder, but in September the jury deadlocked, and the judge declared a mistrial. He was retried in October 2008. This time, the proceedings were televised and drew national attention. In court, Phil was erratic. He changed lawyers several times, argued with his defense team, and made unusual statements. He claimed Lana had harmed herself, said he took medication for schizophrenia, despite not being diagnosed, described himself as bipolar, and spoke of battling inner demons. As the trial continued, disturbing details from Phil's past emerged. One of his sons called him a psychopath. Phil's sons recall that at age 12, he and his brother were blindfolded and forced into unstable situations orchestrated by their father. 5 other women also testified with similar accounts, saying that Phil forced them into intimacy and threatened them with a gun. 2 had reported him to police at the time, but later withdrew their complaints. Alcohol was a factor in every incident. The most damning testimony came from his driver, Adriano, who consistently stated that Phil walked out of his mansion with a gun and said he thought he had killed someone. After 9 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Prosecutors portrayed Phil as a dangerous man who played Russian roulette with women's lives. On May 29, 2009, Phil Spector was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 19 years to life in prison. Without the possibility of parole, he showed no emotion as the verdict was read. A reporter described him as motionless, expressionless, and silent. Even in prison, he drew attention. He requested a divorce from Rochelle, accusing her in a letter of spending his $35 million fortune on luxury cars, designer clothes, and lavish trips. The divorce never happened, but the accusations made headlines. He also maintained his eccentric image, giving interviews to newspapers and magazines and posing in oversized sunglasses and wigs. On January 16, 2021, Phil died at the age of 81. He was taken from prison to the hospital after experiencing respiratory problems, but doctors were unable to save his life. Years earlier, in 2013, HBO released a 92-minute film about his life. With Al Pacino portraying Phil, the case remains one of Hollywood's most publicized, fueled by Phil Spector's fame and the shocking violence surrounding Lana Clarkson's death. For many who knew him, the outcome was no surprise. They had seen his dangerous side long before the tragedy at the Pyrenees Castle. Still, there was a lingering sadness that someone once celebrated as a groundbreaking music innovator ended his life defined not by genius, but by darkness, destruction, and a permanently tarnished legacy. On a quiet street in Wetumpka, Alabama, everything looked ordinary. Neighbors see Susan and her son Evan living a seemingly normal life in a small house. But in May 2017, everything changed. Overnight, Susan and Evan vanished. No goodbyes, no explanations, and no trace of where they had gone. Inside their home, however, something felt off. Strange renovations, unsettling signs of destruction, and an eerie silence from the man who lives with them. What really happened behind the walls of that house on Waterview Drive would become one of Alabama's most chilling mysteries. Susan Osborne was born on the 22nd of August, 1972. She grew up in a typical American household with two brothers, Brian, Jason, and a sister named Nancy. The family environment was calm, stable, and her parents worked hard to create a cozy, secure home. From a young age, Susan stood out as independent, sociable, and friendly. She was especially close to her mother, Linda, and maintained warm relationships with her siblings even as an adult. After her marriage in 2005, Susan relocated from Michigan to Alabama. Her son, Avon Chartrand, was born on the 25th of June, 2002, but the marriage didn't last, and Susan ended up on her own. She chose not to return to her family and decided to start a new life in Alabama. Later, she had a daughter, Hannah Grace, with another partner. That relationship also fell apart, and Susan devoted several years to a long, grueling custody battle for Hannah. As a single mom, she poured herself into raising her children. Despite the daily challenges, she remains patient, energetic, and determined to provide Evan with a stable life. He grew up surrounded by love and attention. He was curious, hardworking, and a little shy. At school, he was respected for his intelligence and maturity. He loved science, played chess, and showed real promise. Managing his health required regular monitoring and some medication. Around 2009, a woman named Holly Morris moved in across the street from Susan. Both single mothers, they quickly bonded. Soon, they were inseparable, supporting each other, spending time together, and talking every day. Later, Jerry Osborne entered Susan's life. A former U.S. Air Force airman, he had been discharged due to disciplinary issues. His fellow service members described him as hot-tempered, prone to aggression, and resistant to authority. After his service, he worked as an emergency dispatcher on base. He was known to struggle with post-traumatic stress, and he was suspicious, withdrawn, and controlling. In the summer of 2013, Susan and Evan spent a day by the water. Fishing was a shared passion of theirs. They even made their own tackle that day. Jerry happened to be there. A spontaneous conversation began. Jerry introduced himself, spoke briefly with Susan, and then left. But a few days later, he appeared again. Their interactions soon became routine. He began taking more initiative. He bonded easily with Evan, inviting him to play, discussing fishing gear, and asking about school. Within a couple of months, they were meeting regularly. That fall, Susan and Evan moved in with Jerry. His home was located on Waterview Drive, a quiet street in Wetumpka with direct access to the Coosa River. The area was remote, located on a private road surrounded by trees. The house sat on a spacious lot set back from the road. Susan liked the location. Peaceful, close to nature, and away from the hustle and bustle of town life. Evan spent more time outside, exploring the outdoors and helping his mom around the property. 6 months later, in January 2014, Susan and Jerry got married. There were no invitations or guests. Even close friends and family weren't informed beforehand. Holly and the rest of the family only found out about this later. Jerry and Susan simply announced that they were officially husband and wife. When asked why they'd chosen to do it this way, they said they wanted a quiet, simple ceremony. Despite the surprise, Susan never gave anyone reason to worry. On the surface, everything seemed fine. In the first few months after the wedding, life appeared uncomplicated. Jerry continued working as a dispatcher for emergency services at the nearby military base. Susan focused on the household and the kids. Evan did well in school, kept things tidy, and helped with chores. The family had 2 dogs, Sugar and Schnee. On weekends, they would go fishing, cook meals together, and tend to the yard. Gradually, Jerry started upgrading the home, buying new furniture, replacing appliances, and making small repairs. The house near the Coosa River seemed like the perfect place to start fresh. Its windows looked out over the water, and on warm evenings, they could hear the crickets chirping. The neighborhood was considered safe, and the neighbors were friendly. For the first time in years, Susan felt like she had regained stability, a home, a family, and a sense of peace. After so many struggles, it felt like a well-earned new chapter. After their wedding in 2014, their life seemed peaceful from the outside. But gradually, Jerry's behavior began to change. At first, the differences were subtle. He started asking Susan to stay home more often, telling her she didn't need to work, that he earned enough and wanted her to focus on the family. Those requests soon turned into demands. Eventually, Susan left her job and became completely dependent on Jerry, both financially and in her daily life. Over time, Jerry began cutting her off from the outside world. He would often listen in on her phone conversations, ask her to use speakerphone, and insist on being present whenever she spoke to her family or her friend Holly. Later, he began monitoring her messages. Susan's contact with her siblings and mother slowly dwindled. Her social life faded almost entirely. Even leaving the house became restricted. Jerry insisted on personally driving her to and from errands, often waiting outside until she was done. Visits with Holly, once a regular part of Susan's life, became rare. And when they did see each other, Holly noticed changes. Susan was more guarded, avoided eye contact, and didn't always feel free to speak openly. In public, Jerry worked hard to maintain the image of a normal, stable family man. He came across as polite, calm, even friendly, never showing signs of aggression, but behind closed doors, it was different. His behavior grew more unpredictable. Sometimes he would vanish for days without explanation. When Susan asked where he had been, he would give vague answers, claiming to be on assignments or gathering information for her custody battle. In September 2016, Jerry disappeared for several days. He didn't answer calls or messages, and Susan, growing worried, eventually reported him missing. But when she checked their shared phone account, she discovered Jerry had been using his phone the entire time. There were multiple outgoing calls, including 2 to a taxi service. Later, he sent her a photo of a house, claiming he had been away gathering information about her former partner's family. It didn't add up. Susan realized he had been lying. Not long before that, Jerry listed Susan's boat for sale on Craigslist without her permission. This was upsetting because she had been restoring the boat herself and it meant a lot to her. This was another sign that Jerry was making decisions about her possessions without talking to her first. As Jerry's control escalated, Susan's independence eroded piece by piece. He questioned or rejected almost every decision she made. He dictated her communication, her finances, where she went, what she bought, even what she wore. Step by step, he built a closed world around her, tightening his grip not through outright violence, but through control that left little room for escape. Susan rarely shared what was happening at home, but Holly noticed changes. Susan began using email instead of text, something unusual given the closeness of their friendship. Later, Holly realized it had been Susan's attempt to communicate without Jerry watching. That fall, Susan discovered Jerry was secretly seeing another woman named Brittany. His messages revealed he had spent an evening with her at a club before staying overnight at a hotel. Susan took screenshots of the messages and sent them to Holly, the only person she truly confided in. Holly confirmed Susan's suspicions and invited her, along with Evan and Hannah, to come stay in Florida for a while. To escape and clear her head, Susan said she would think about it, but admitted she wasn't ready to take that step just yet. In January, Susan made another shocking discovery. She found a profile for Jerry on a website known for escort listings targeting male clients. The page featured a photo of Jerry in his underwear, his face hidden, but his distinctive tattoos clearly visible. The description advertised services for men, and the listed phone number matched Jerry's. At first, Susan clung to the hope that it was old. The profile had originally been created in 2011, years before they met, and in another state. But as she read more closely, she realized the account showed recent activity. The conversations were ongoing, and they had taken place during their marriage. She sent the link and screenshots to Holly. This was the breaking point. Susan now knew Jerry hadn't just been lying about his mysterious trips and messages to other women. He had been hiding an entire secret life. Any attempt to rationalize his behavior crumbled under the weight of the undeniable evidence. In a conversation with Holly, Susan admitted she couldn't stay married to Jerry any longer. She planned to file for divorce. To create distance, she moved into a separate bedroom. A few days later, Jerry began pressing her, asking why she wasn't sleeping beside him, demanding to know what had changed. Susan didn't reveal she had seen the website. Instead, she asked him pointed questions about names, messages, and dates. Jerry denied everything. He insisted he had never been in contact with men, that the conversations weren't his, that it was all false. He dodged questions, changed the subject, and refused to admit anything. For Susan, the discovery was devastating, not just emotionally, but with a chilling sense of danger. She realized she now knew too much. By spring 2017, Susan and Holly were deep in preparations for Holly's upcoming wedding. Holly had moved to Florida, where her fiancé worked with the Coast Guard. The ceremony was planned for Key West. Susan was to be the maid of honor. They talked almost daily, discussing travel plans, dresses, and the details of the big day. Evan was set to join his mother on the trip, a chance for both of them to get away and relax. Nothing about their conversations suggested a looming crisis. The last week of May began as usual. On May 26, Susan visited her daughter Hannah, who was living with her father. Later that day, she called Holly and told her about a letter that had been delivered to her house. The letter was addressed to Holly's previous address. Susan said she would mail it to Holly the next week. That same day, Evan stayed home from school, feeling unwell. In their conversations, Susan gave no indication anything was wrong. On May 28, Susan and Holly spoke again by phone. Everything seemed routine. The next day, Memorial Day, May 29, they exchanged text messages, chatting about everyday things. Nothing seemed unusual. But that evening, when Holly sent another message, there was no reply. At first, she didn't worry, assuming Susan was busy. When there was still no response the next day, she grew concerned. On May 30, Holly tried calling Susan, but no one answered. She kept texting and calling throughout the day. Meanwhile, Susan's relatives were also trying to reach her. Soon, both Susan's and Evan's phones went straight to voicemail. No calls, no social media activity, no bank transactions, nothing. That same day, Hannah and her paternal grandmother went to the house on Waterview Drive. Evan had a scheduled medical appointment, and Hannah wanted to drop something off for him. Instead of Susan, they were met by Jerry. He was visibly agitated, sweating, and wouldn't let them inside. He claimed the house was a mess and insisted Susan had left him, taking Evan, and had run off with another man. He gave no details and grew irritated when questioned. Finally, he shut the door on them. The next day, Evan missed his medical appointment. That was a massive red flag. Susan had always been meticulous about his care. She never missed anything related to his health. For Holly, this was the moment it became clear something was terribly wrong. Susan had never disappeared without explanation. Even a single day without contact was unusual. Now, it had been several, and there was still no word. Holly continued messaging daily. She even tried calling Jerry, but he didn't answer. The family began to realize this wasn't a spontaneous getaway. Susan hadn't just run off. This wasn't her vanishing by choice. Weeks passed. Family members kept calling, texting, and leaving voicemails. At the end of June, Susan's mother mailed her a letter. It eventually came back, stamped undeliverable. On July 28, 2017, exactly 2 months after the last confirmed contact with Susan and Evan, they were officially reported missing. The Elmore County Sheriff's Office stepped in. Their first step was routine a wellness check. 2 deputies drove out to the quiet house on Waterview Drive, hoping to speak with Susan and her son. Instead, they were greeted at the door by Jerry Osborne. He seemed unprepared for the visit. He told them he was in the middle of cleaning and asked that they keep it brief. When questioned about Susan and Evan, Jerry claimed they had left on Memorial Day. According to him, he and Susan had argued, after which she packed up, took Evan, and got into a waiting vehicle with another man. He said he hadn't seen them since. But Jerry's story was shaky. He first described the man as tall, dark-haired, with a beard and sunglasses. In another version, he claimed it was Susan's brother, Brian. He also contradicted himself about the vehicle, sometimes saying it was a truck, other times a silver Nissan SUV. Detectives checked bank records, and phone logs, and travel databases. From May 30 onward, there was total silence. No calls. No. Texts. No. Social media activity. Susan's and Evan's passports showed no travel. More troubling, Evan's prescriptions, vital for his health, hadn't been refilled. No doctor visits. No pharmacy records. For investigators, this was the first major red flag. Jerry's behavior only deepened suspicion. He hadn't filed a missing persons report, hadn't contacted Susan's family, and showed no urgency to locate them. For someone who lived under the same roof, his lack of concern was glaring. Investigators began to suspect this wasn't a story of a woman running away. It was the story of a cover-up, still, without witnesses or physical evidence. There was little to go on. A walkthrough of the house revealed no signs of a struggle. But one detail stood out. Susan's and Evan's belongings were gone. No clothing, no documents, not even everyday items. It was as if they had never lived there at all. A second visit, this time with a search warrant, changed everything. By then, the house had undergone significant renovations. New carpet covered the floors. The walls were freshly painted, and multiple rooms had been altered. Jerry insisted he had simply decided it was time for home improvements. He claimed Susan had scrawled offensive messages on the walls before leaving, and he had no choice but to paint over them. He also said he tore out the hardwood floors himself because a contractor offered him a discount if he handled the demolition. But when detectives followed up, the company confirmed no such discount program existed. Receipts showed Jerry had purchased paint, adhesive, carpet, and renovation supplies in the first week of June. Days after Susan and Evan disappeared, neighbors later came forward with troubling accounts. On the night of May 29 into May 30, they heard what sounded like gunshots. The following morning, Jerry Osborne was seen tending unusually large fires in his yard. Thick black smoke billowed into the air, and one neighbor recalled feeling the heat from across his own property. The fires burned for several days. No one knew exactly what was being destroyed, but the timing, immediately after Susan and Evan's disappearance, was impossible to ignore. Jerry's father was also spotted at the property, helping with the burning before leaving quietly each afternoon. Jerry would later claim they were simply disposing of old flooring and debris. Investigators also learned that Jerry removed the home's original security camera system right after Susan and Evan disappeared. He replaced it with a new setup, erasing all prior footage. The original hardware was gone, and with it, any chance of seeing who had come and gone from the house during those crucial days. Another discovery raised even more red flags. As a civilian employee at Maxwell Air Force Base, Jerry had access to restricted areas. Witnesses reported that he was transporting materials, construction debris, trash bags, and other unknown items, and discarding them in base dumpsters without authorization. He always worked alone. He claimed it was leftover waste from remodeling, but no one at the base could confirm he had permission to dispose of material that way. To investigators, Jerry's actions looked like a calculated effort to clean everything up, remove traces, eliminate anything suspicious, and destroy potential evidence. Every step he took appeared aimed at erasing something. In early July, detectives escalated the search. Forensic teams entered the Osborne home with luminol. Under normal light, the house was spotless. Fresh paint, new carpeting, and not a single visible stain. But in the glow of the chemical spray, the truth appeared. Roughly 20 biological stains lit up across 3 rooms: the kitchen, the bathroom, and the laundry room. The size, placement, and patterns were consistent with significant trauma. Samples were collected for DNA testing. Weeks later, the results came back. The biological material matched Susan Lynn Osborne and her son, Avon Chartrand. It was the first hard evidence that a violent event had occurred inside the house. It directly contradicted Jerry's story that Susan and Evan had walked away unharmed. Search teams expanded their efforts beyond the house. Cadaver dogs were brought in. They reacted strongly to a utility shed at the far end of the backyard, signaling at the door as if detecting a human scent. Yet when the shed was dismantled and searched in detail, nothing was found. Investigators turned to the surrounding property and waterways. Volunteers searched along the Coosa River. Dive teams explored its depths. Drones scanned the wooded terrain from above. Despite the massive effort, no remains were recovered. What began as a missing persons case had now evolved into something darker. The forensic evidence, the fires, the erasure of surveillance, the disappearing dogs, every thread led back to Jerry. One house, and one fateful night, Jerry refused to provide any statements. He hired an attorney and invoked his right to remain silent, cutting off all communication with law enforcement. Over time, he ignored every attempt by investigators and by Susan's family to reach him, whether by phone, mail, or in person. Meanwhile, the investigation pressed on, but without bodies, eyewitnesses, or direct proof of what had happened. Prosecutors were unable to move forward with charges due to a lack of conclusive evidence. While police had collected a considerable amount of circumstantial evidence, it wasn't legally strong enough to prove that Susan and Evan had been victims of a crime. That legal gray area allowed Jerry to remain free. 37 days after Susan vanished, Jerry filed for divorce. In his paperwork, he claimed the marriage had ended and that Susan had abandoned the home. Because Susan could not be present to contest the filing, the court granted the divorce quickly and without challenge. Soon after, Jerry began selling off possessions and eventually sold the house. Even though it was still the center of an active investigation, the new owner had no ties to the case, and from that point forward, law enforcement would need a new warrant to search the property. Jerry relocated to the nearby town of Prattville, roughly a 30-minute drive from Wetumpka, and started a new relationship. According to what investigators and Susan's family were able to learn, his new partner had no publicly known awareness of his past. Authorities and relatives feared she might not know about the suspicions surrounding the disappearance of his former family. Jerry kept a low profile, avoided public attention, declined interviews, and issued no statements to the press. Every year, on May 29th, the day Susan and Evan were last seen, a vigil is held in Wetumpka. Friends, neighbors, and family gather near the river, close to the home where they spent their final years. Candles are set afloat on the water, and heartfelt speeches are shared. These gatherings serve not only as a memorial, but also as a subtle reminder to local authorities that the case remains unsolved and still demands justice. Within the Wetumpka community, there is little doubt that Susan and Evan did not leave of their own free will. Their disappearance is remembered as a heartbreaking tragedy that shook the entire area. While Jerry has never been charged, he remains the one person many believe holds the answers. Years have now passed since Susan and Evan went missing, yet the case is still open. It hasn't been closed, but it hasn't progressed either. The absence of physical remains continues to be the greatest obstacle to holding anyone accountable. Still, Susan's family has not given up. They hold on to the belief that one day the truth will surface, that someone will finally speak out or new evidence will come to light. When that day arrives, their disappearance will no longer be a mystery, but a solved crime with a named perpetrator. For now, though, the truth remains hidden, just like everything else that happened on the night of May 29, 2017, inside the house on Waterview Drive. A dental hygienist gave her married lover a year to leave his wife of 34 years. 11 months later, he and his wife, Bianca, went hunting in Africa. The trip was barely underway when she was found dead in a remote hunting cabin, shot in the chest by a shotgun. At first, it looked like a tragic accident, but as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling question. Was this really a hunting accident or a carefully planned murder stemming? Bianca Rudolph was born on December 4, 1959, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She grew up with her two brothers, Vince and Ralph Fenicio, and later attended the University of Pittsburgh. It was there that she met Lawrence Rudolph, aka Larry, then a dental student. The two fell in love, married, and went on to build a seemingly perfect life together. They had two children, Julian Rudolph and Anna Bianca Rudolph. Larry established a thriving dental practice in Pittsburgh, even starring in television commercials for his specialty, Zeditune dentistry, a rarity at the time. Bianca initially worked at the practice but later devoted herself to raising their children. By all appearances, the Rudolphs were the picture of success. Julian and Anna Bianca enjoyed a comfortable suburban upbringing. Larry was often described as charismatic and generous, and Bianca was a beloved mother. Bianca and Larry also shared a passion for hunting. Though Bianca had never hunted before meeting Larry, she eventually became a respected international hunter and even served as president of the Safari Club International Pittsburgh chapter. Larry's reputation peaked when he won the prestigious 2007 Weatherby Award, often called the Nobel Prize of trophy hunting, but beneath the polished exterior, dark cracks were forming. By the mid-2000s, Larry's dental partners accused him of embezzling money from their practice. When threatened with legal action, Larry denied wrongdoing but was ultimately forced out. In retaliation, he opened Three Rivers Dental Group, only 500 feet from his former office, and began building his own empire. In 2006, while on a fishing trip in Zambia, Larry claimed that a crocodile attack cost him his left thumb. He told insurance companies he could no longer work as a dentist due to nerve damage and began collecting $30,000 per month in disability benefits. Tax-free. Many who knew him doubted the story, whispering that the so-called accident was fabricated. Lori Miliron, a dental hygienist, had joined Larry's office in 2002. Despite knowing he was married, she began an affair with him that would stretch on for years. According to co-workers, Larry's flirtations in the office were no secret. Dental assistant Marianne Versmessen later remarked that Julian always had someone on the side. As rumors spread, even Larry's standing in the hunting community began to collapse. In 2012, the Safari Club International expelled him after accusations of adultery, dishonesty, and misconduct. They stripped his name from record books and revoked his awards. Larry fought back with a defamation lawsuit and, in May 2016, won a settlement. managing to keep his beloved Weatherby Award. Throughout all this, Bianca defended her husband. In a deposition, she insisted she was not a long-suffering wife. She said, her husband and her have been married 30-some years, happily married. But the cracks were impossible to ignore. To friends and insiders, it was becoming clear that Larry was leading a double life. Then came the ultimatum. According to former office manager Anna Grimley, the relationship between Larry and Lori had turned toxic. By 2015, after years of being the other woman, Lori demanded more. She told Larry that if he didn't leave Bianca within a year, she will end his relationship with him. Grimley recalled that Lori claimed their affair had lasted 15 to 20 years and that she was tired of being in the shadows. She wanted the dental offices sold, the marriage ended, and Larry for herself. What followed was a countdown to tragedy. Anna Grimley, a manager at Three Rivers Dental, later claimed in the Hulu docuseries that Lori Milliron wasn't just having an affair, she wanted a whole new life. She wanted to have whatever she wanted and be able to show it off. She wanted Bianca's life. What she said to Anna is, Larry has a year to get rid of Bianca or she's leaving. The countdown had begun and Larry was under pressure. Outwardly, though, nothing seemed unusual. Larry and Bianca continued their high-end lifestyle, splitting time between travel, real estate investments, and visits to Arizona, where their daughter Anna Bianca was in college. Then came the trip that would change everything. In the fall of 2016, after 34 years of marriage, they returned to Kafue National Park in Zambia. Bianca was the only one hunting, chasing a leopard. Neither knew this safari would be their last together. After nearly 2 weeks, they began packing to head home for a family wedding. But on the morning of October 11, 2016, the quiet camp shattered with a gunshot. Game scout Spencer Kokoma sprinted to their cabin. Inside, he was met with a gruesome sight. When he entered, he was very shocked. Bianca lay in a pool of blood. Her shotgun was nearby, still partly zipped in its case, the barrel torn open by the blast. Larry was kneeling over her, crying. At first, Larry told Kokoma and camp manager Godfrey Nikub that he'd been in the bathroom when the gun went off. But Kokoma, a veteran game scout, immediately spotted problems. He'd personally seen Bianca unload her gun the night before. She never left live ammunition inside. And Larry's explanation shifted quickly. First, he suggested Bianca had killed herself. Later, he claimed it was a tragic accident while she was packing the weapon. Even stranger. Kokoma noticed that Larry was fully dressed when he entered the cabin. Yet, police later reported that Larry said he had been wrapped only in a towel at the time. The story was already unraveling while they still stood over Bianca's body. What followed raised even more red flags. Bianca's body was transported 4 hours away to Lusaka, Zambia's capital, for an autopsy. Despite her being a devout Catholic, Larry immediately insisted on cremation. Less than a week later, he left Africa, without even telling his children their mother was dead. But behind the scenes, a U.S. Embassy official was already suspicious. The official, a former Marine with decades of firearms experience, examined Bianca's body at the funeral home. He photographed the wound and measured it, later estimating the shot had been fired from 5 to 8 feet away, far too distant to be an end. Her own life or accident? When Larry discovered this inspection had taken place, he was livid. He called the consular chief, demanding to know who would have access to the photos and reports. Once again, he floated the claim that Bianca might have killed herself. Meanwhile, Musua Muse, an intelligence officer from Zambia's Wildlife Authority, conducted his own review. He noted the shotgun's barrel was far too long for self-infliction, that police had failed to collect fingerprints, and that Larry's tears had dried almost instantly. Even more suspiciously, when asked about the operation of his own shotgun, Larry refused to explain. Muse's instincts told him something wasn't right. He couldn't see any genuine grief in Larry. He saw something in Larry's look and had doubted immediately. This was no accident. Zambian police quickly ruled that Bianca Rudolph's death was nothing more than a tragic hunting accident. an accidental discharge from her shotgun. The case was closed almost as soon as it began. But nearly 8,000 miles away in the United States, questions started surfacing, questions Larry Rudolph wasn't prepared for. Why was Larry, a wealthy Pittsburgh dentist, so quick to cremate his devout Catholic wife? Why was he filing life insurance claims worth almost $5 million just days after her death? And why, within months, was his longtime mistress, Lori Miliron, living openly with him in Arizona, as if Bianca had never existed? At his dental practice, the atmosphere turned eerily silent. Staff recalled being ordered not to mention Bianca's death. No flowers, no condolences, no memorial. Patients who asked about her were brushed off with quick subject changes. Then came something even stranger. New surveillance cameras appeared everywhere in the Offahover patients' chairs, in the lab, even in the staff break room. One assistant remembered leaning over to whisper to a coworker, only to have Rudolph call the front desk from Arizona seconds later, demanding to know why they were whispering. Behind the scenes, whispers were growing louder. Former employee Anna Grimley, unsettled by what she knew of Larry's affair, picked up the phone and called the FBI. To her shock, agents revealed she wasn't the first to come forward. Just days after Bianca's death, one of Bianca's close friends had already contacted investigators, insisting that Bianca would never have chosen cremation and pointing out Larry's history of affairs. As FBI agents dug in, the so-called hunting accident unraveled into a chilling puzzle of lies, greed, and premeditated murder. Federal investigators replicated the scene with the same type of shotgun, ammunition, and case. Running ballistic pattern tests, they concluded that Bianca could not have accidentally shot herself. The wound to her heart showed the gun had been fired from at least 1 to 3 feet away. The weapon hadn't gone off in her hands. It had been aimed at her. Evidence in court would later prove what many already suspected. Larry Rudolph shot his wife through the heart, then staged the scene to look like an accident. But the most explosive evidence was yet to come. Another stunning twist in the case came not from investigators, but from a bartender in Phoenix, Brian Lovelace, who worked at the upscale restaurant Steak 44, testified that one night in the spring of 2020, during a heated argument between Larry Rudolph and his mistress, Lori Miliron, he heard Larry shout, "He killed his wife for her." The words rang out during a break in the music, and Lovelace swore under oath that there was no mistaking what he heard. For prosecutors, it was a bombshell. For Larry's defense, it was nothing more than a comment taken out of context. But time was running out for Larry Rudolph. More than 5 years after Bianca's death, he was arrested in Mexico on December 21, 2021, while on holiday in Cabo with Lori. Just weeks later, Lori herself was indicted for obstruction of justice, perjury, and being an accessory. The two went to trial together in July 2022. Larry's legal team fought to the end, painting the case as circumstantial. He even took the stand, claiming that Bianca's death was a tragic accident, that she had pulled the trigger herself while packing her gun. He told jurors that he and Bianca had lived in an open marriage since 2000 and insisted they were content with that arrangement. But that testimony backfired. Several jurors later admitted they had been undecided until Larry himself spoke. His demeanor, his contradictions, and his implausible explanations convinced them of his guilt. In August 2022, the verdict was given. Larry Rudolph was convicted of the murder of Bianca Rudolph. In August 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison. He also received a 20-year prison sentence for filing a false life insurance claim, which will run concurrently. In addition to the prison sentence, Larry was ordered to repay $4,877,744 in life insurance proceeds he received. Et plus à $2 million fine. He was also ordered to forfeit any assets he acquired as a result of his crimes. This result shows that no matter how much money, fame, or power he has, he is still accountable for his crimes. Iber U.S. Attorney Cole Finnegan said after Rudolph was sentenced, "The fact that justice was served today was no accident. It was part of the dedicated efforts of public servants who are dedicated to justice. They are grateful to the attorneys, officers, and investigators who contributed to this outcome. However, Rudolph's lawyers maintained their client's innocence after the verdict and said they planned to appeal. Lori Milliron was convicted of accessory, obstruction of justice, and perjury. She received 17 years behind bars. At the sentencing hearing, Judge William J. Martinez said the evidence showed she had encouraged Larry to commit the crime, adding that she appeared without remorse when she heard testimony about the murder and saw photos of the scene. But perhaps the most heartbreaking toll was on Bianca's children. At first, both Anna Bianca and her brother Julian defended their father, even submitting sworn affidavits declaring his innocence. The trial shattered that belief. Julian later admitted he can't stand by that original statement because that was before he saw the evidence in the trial. Nothing could have prepared his for those visuals. Now, when his father calls from prison, Julian rarely picks up. Today, Larry Rudolph, now 70 years old, sits inside the U.S. Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, serving life without parole. Lori Milliron is incarcerated at Federal Correctional Institution Mariana in Florida, with a scheduled release date of April 15, 2036. Bianca set out on what should have been a triumphant safari, but instead, it became her final journey. What began as whispers of an accident unraveled into a web of lies, betrayal, and greed that stretched across continents. But in the end, every deception left a trail. Bianca's death was not only the end of a life, it was the shattering of a family, the unveiling of a man's double life, and the downfall of a carefully crafted facade. Today, Larry sits behind bars, stripped of freedom, while Lori counts down her years in prison. Yet for Bianca's children, no verdict or sentence can erase the image of their mother's final moments. In the wild heart of Africa, Bianca hunted for an animal. Instead, she became the prey of the man who promised to love her for life. Justice has been served, but the shadows of this tragedy will haunt everyone it touched for years to come. A seemingly peaceful small town in Florida has been hiding a dark secret for years. Michael Shaver, husband, father, and aspiring pilot, suddenly disappeared in late 2015. Friends and family received only brief texts and vague social media updates, but no one actually saw him. Meanwhile, his wife, Lori, was relieved, quietly selling off her husband's belongings and moving on as if he had never existed. 3 years later, a concrete block in Lori's backyard was smashed, revealing a grisly truth: a skeleton wrapped in a blue tarp, buried behind the family home. From there, the curtain of mystery gradually opened, a story of contradictions, where love, domestic violence, and lies intertwine. So who took Michael Shaver's life, and what turned a sweet, loving marriage into a tragedy that shocked the entire community? To understand how this nightmare unfolded, we need to go back to the beginning, to a time when Lori and Michael were just two teenagers in love, believing their future together would be nothing but bright. Lori and Michael Shaver were high school sweethearts. They grew up in a small rural town in New York State, where the school had only about 500 students. They met in the mid-1992 in 7th grade and began dating in high school. That same year, Michael dropped out of school because he was not interested in studying. Lori's parents had a frank talk with Michael, advising him that dropping out would make it difficult for him to get a good job and support his family later. This advice influenced Michael. He returned to school, graduated from high school, and went to college. In 2006, they married and soon had a daughter, Isabel. Michael then pursued his dream of becoming a pilot, earned his license, and found work flying. The family went through many changes but stayed together. When Isabel was 1 year old, they moved to Florida, decided they didn't like it, and returned to New York. Later, due to a change in Michael's work, they moved back to Florida again. Michael was flexible and open to change. After that move, he decided to stop flying and switch to engineering. He worked at Disney and later at another company related to amusement rides. Michael also built aircraft models and even assembled his own plane. He frequently changed jobs and moved between states in search of better opportunities. After 2005, they settled in the town of Clermont, Florida. However, the relationship between husband and wife became strained. After nearly 10 years of marriage, Lori began to complain about Michael. In 2010, she told her family that Michael had attacked her after coming home from training and taking a shower, hitting her in the face. She said the bruises had already faded. Another time, just because she wanted a cookie, he threw her on the sofa and hit her. However, for some reason, she did not record or report the injuries, and they quickly disappeared. By mid-November 2015, their marriage was close to falling apart. On November 15, Lori told her family that Michael had left. He walked out without taking his belongings and didn't say where he was going. Lori felt relieved at his departure. The next day, she began selling his things for cash. Michael missed several days of work. Then his boss got an email from him saying he wouldn't be coming back and wanted to resign. This was odd because Michael had worked hard to secure a well-paying job and was very dedicated to it. His manager, who knew him as reliable and hardworking, suspected something was wrong. Michael ignored calls and responded only to a few messages before stopping entirely. He ended up missing a full week of work. When asked to discuss the situation, Michael sent brief messages claiming a family emergency, but no one could reach him directly. Meanwhile, Lori became a single mother to their 7-year-old daughter. She didn't file for child support, saying she earned enough and didn't need his help. Given that Michael had supposedly quit his job, Lori believed he couldn't pay support even if ordered by a court. She also chose not to pursue divorce. On paper, they remained legally married in the years that followed. It all seemed strange. To those closest to Michael, his behavior was out of character. He had never said he planned to leave his family for his career or another woman. It was also odd that he abandoned his greatest passion, an unfinished airplane he had been building for years. At first, a few people paid attention. They didn't immediately notice how drastically Michael's life had changed. After separating from his wife, he cut off contact with everyone, relatives and old friends included. Later, when Michael's mother fell seriously ill and was hospitalized, his brother tried repeatedly to reach him so he could visit her. Michael ignored every call. He only sent brief, evasive texts. Naturally, this angered and hurt his family. He never visited his ailing mother. Eventually, he stopped paying his car installments, and the car was repossessed in 2016. The bank tried to sue him for default, but even that failed. He was declared bankrupt, and no one could find him to serve legal papers. One by one, his documents, driver's license, pilot's license, passport, expired and were canceled. He never applied to renew them. By late February 2018, Real Alarm Sitin. No one had seen Michael in person or knew where he was for almost 3 years. People hadn't panicked earlier because he occasionally posted text updates and random images on social media, though there were no new photos of himself. He also exchanged curt emails with a few friends and family members. Still, by 2018, suspicion had grown. No one had laid eyes on him since 2015, and no one had spoken with him face to face. Close friends kept trying to call. One friend contacted the police to report their concerns and requested a welfare check. Police inquiries quickly showed that Michael hadn't rented or bought property. On paper, he still lived at the house he once shared with his wife and daughter. Officers went to the house and asked Lori how they could reach Michael. She repeated the story about his sudden departure and abandonment of the family. At first, she cooperated and allowed them inside. The house appeared normal, but something felt off. The officers decided to question Lori more carefully. They asked to see the yard and found a concrete slab there. Lori said she'd poured it herself to cover an old, never-finished duck pond. The slab showed signs of large fires, which she claimed she used to burn unwanted items. Remarkably, When pouring the concrete, she carved her name and that of her fiancé Travis Filmer into it. The situation seemed suspicious. The police arranged to return in a few days with cadaver dogs to search the property. After that, Lori's attitude changed abruptly. She became nervous and told the officers they were no longer welcome in her home. This only intensified the investigation. Police began to suspect Lori's involvement in Michael's disappearance and sought a warrant to search the house and grounds, something they had ample cause to request. Given that Michael was supposedly living there, yet hadn't been seen in 3 years, on March 9, 2018, they obtained the warrant and returned. Lori was furious and tried to turn them away. But with the warrant, the search proceeded. In the backyard, a cadaver dog immediately alerted at the concrete slab. Ground-penetrating radar was used to scan the area, revealing a cavity beneath the concrete. Investigators decided to break open the slab to see what was inside. They found a human skeleton wrapped in a blue tarp and tied with a green rope. Michael had been officially reported missing just a month earlier, and the remains were discovered in his own backyard. The bones were in such poor condition that even collecting usable DNA samples was difficult. Identification relied on dental records. A forensic expert then confirmed Michael had died more than 2 years earlier. This only deepened police suspicion, because all the posts and messages reportedly from Michael during that period were fake. Even the writing style suggested someone else had sent them. It seemed obvious the killer had been sending those messages to delay any search for Michael and mislead everyone. Naturally, Lori became the prime suspect. Despite the body's poor condition, the forensic expert determined Michael was killed by a shot to the back of the head from a .38 caliber pistol. Investigators then found something notable in Lori's records. Lori owned a collection of firearms in Florida, including a .38 caliber pistol. When investigators moved to seize it for ballistic testing, she claimed it had been lost or stolen years earlier. Strangely, she had never filed a report about the missing weapon. Even though firearm owners are required to do so, a review of Lori's computer and phone showed she was the only person in Michael's close circle who never called or texted him after he disappeared. This is strange, as Michael is said to have left on November 15, 2015. Moreover, Michael loved his daughter Isabel very much. He was seen as a loving, involved father, and no one believed he would simply abandon her and show no interest in her life. Tracing the IP address used for Michael's social media posts led back to Lori's computer. Lori responded that she wasn't the only one who used it. She said that after Michael's death, she dated multiple men and even tried to remarry, despite not being divorced, so several people had access to the computer at different times. While that meant others could have made the posts, it seemed unlikely. Why would strangers who didn't know Michael impersonate him online? Further investigation suggested Lori may have been unfaithful while Michael was alive. She said she met a man named Jeremy Townsend at her daughter's school. He noticed the bruises Michael had allegedly left on her face. At their next meeting, he gave her a note with his phone number, saying he understood what she was going through and wanted to help. According to Lori, she called Jeremy after another beating. They began a secret relationship. He promised to help her deal with her abusive husband and family problems. Lori said she wanted a divorce, but Michael wouldn't allow it. Lori later claimed she discovered Jeremy had lied, that he had left his wife but not actually divorced her, and that he eventually reconciled with his wife. Still, Lori said this made her realize that she didn't need a husband who abused her like Michael. On November 10, 2015, she told Michael she was leaving him. He took the news calmly, she said. 5 days later, according to Lori, Michael simply left. She claimed she didn't know where he went and didn't care, saying she heard he headed toward Georgia. About 6 months later, in May 2016, Michael allegedly returned home. Lori said he immediately turned violent. He attacked her, threatened to kill her, threw her to the floor, and kicked her in the head. She claimed she was saved only because Jeremy was in the house. Seeing the attack, Jeremy took a gun from her collection and shot Michael in the back of the head, killing him almost instantly, because their 7-year-old daughter, Isabel, was in the house. Lori said she feared the child would witness the shooting. According to Lori, she didn't want her daughter to witness all of this, so she wanted to get rid of the body as quickly as possible. She immediately takes Isabel out of the house, while Jerem stays by Michael's body and promises to take care of the problem, including cleaning up the crime scene. The attack happened on a weekday morning, so Lori was able to take her daughter Isabel to school and return a few hours later. She then learned that Jereme had used a hole she and Michael had previously dug for a planned pond project that was never completed. He had placed the body in the hole and buried it. In this way, Lori transfers all responsibility for solving the crime scene to Jereme. Soon after, Lori broke up with Jeremy and began dating Travis Filmer. They were even engaged in 2016. However, they couldn't legally marry because Lori was still married to Michael and had not divorced him. Michael had not been declared dead or missing, making divorce impossible. Lori claims she didn't know whether Michael's body had been buried in the backyard, saying it happened without her consent or presence. She said Jereme had handled it and refused to discuss it. Travis denied any knowledge of a burial. Meanwhile, it turned out Jerem was not the person posting on Michael's social media. Detectives quickly discovered that Lori had been misleading relatives, friends, and acquaintances with conflicting stories about Michael's disappearance. She told some relatives he had been arrested and was in prison. She told friends he had run off with another woman. These contradictions deepened suspicion against her. When the detectives make it clear that they do not believe Lori, she continues to deny guilt, but now claims that she is very worried about the outcome of the case. She said she didn't want to lose custody of her daughter and was afraid to involve the police. The more investigators spoke with her, the more inconsistencies they found. Her statements contradicted each other. When police questioned Jerem, he denied Lori's statements and called her a liar. He said he had no idea what happened to Michael until the investigation. Though there were some doubts about Jerem's account, investigators found it more credible than Lori's and invited him to cooperate. Jerem admitted to a brief affair with Lori, which Michael discovered. Jerem then called his wife, Vanessa Townsend, and told her everything. This led to many conflicts between Jereme and Vanessa, but he and his wife eventually made up. Even before that, Jerem had tried to distance himself from Lori because she was turning him against Michael. After Michael disappeared, Lori told Jereme she had taken care of Michael and that he wouldn't bother them anymore. He didn't know what she meant. Police focused on two suspects, Lori and Jereme, and needed to determine who was responsible or if both were involved. The odds increasingly pointed to Lori, especially since she had been posting on social media to imitate Michael's activity. On September 18, 2020, Lori Shaver was arrested on suspicion of murdering her husband, Michael. Her defense attorney believed the case was winnable, arguing that much of the evidence was circumstantial. The defense strategy appeared to center on claims of self-defense, domestic violence, and Lori's insistence that she had nothing to do with the killing or the concrete encased body. Prosecutors argued that Michael, Jeremy, and Lori were involved in a love triangle, and that during the conflict, one person, Michael, ended up dead. After initial hearings, the charge was reduced to second-degree murder. With possible mitigating factors such as domestic violence and self-defense considered, the trial did not begin until September 2024 due to the need to analyze and compare hundreds of pieces of evidence. By then, prosecutors asserted the killing was neither self-defense nor a love triangle gone wrong. It was a violent felony. As sinister detail remained, Lori claimed Michael disappeared in November, but investigators found his credit card activity stopped in September. Around that same time, neighbors noticed Lori had acquired a large pig that began living in her yard and barn. At the same time, neighbors also began complaining about a strong stench. When questioned, Lori consistently blamed the smell on the new animal. This raised suspicions that the pig might be connected to the crime, though how remained unclear. Notably, the defense attorney withheld parts of their strategy until the start of the hearing. Now, previously confidential case details have been made public. They include statements from Isabel, Michael and Lori's daughter, who was 7 at the time of the crime. She was 15 when the trial began, and about to turn 16. Now a high school senior, she says violence at home was common. Isabel said that her father came home from work almost every day and argued with her mother. His behavior, she said, became increasingly cruel. By fall 2015, Isabel lived in constant fear. When her father arrived, she hid in her bedroom to avoid him. According to her mother endured the same environment. Isabel said her mother had to continually fend off her father's attacks. In mid-September 2015, she witnessed another violent incident. One evening on the terrace, Michael started an argument and began beating Lori. Isabel saw her father tackle her mother to the ground and stomp on her head while she screamed for help. Despite being only 7, Isabel decided to act. She ran to her mother's bedroom, where she knew a .38 caliber pistol was kept, grabbed it, returned to the terrace, aimed at her father, and fired several times, hitting the back of his head. In court, she insisted she did what was necessary to protect her mother. She insisted that she had to shoot her father or he would beat her mother to death. Afterward, she said, her mother did not call an ambulance. Instead, her mother called Jeremy, who came to help dispose of the body. If this testimony is correct, then Lori has cleared suspicion of the murder itself, blaming Isabel. While Jeremy takes care of the aftermath, the defense portrayed Lori as a mother trying to shield her child from the consequences of a terrible act. Still, the case remained complex and confusing, with many unanswered questions. The new account failed to resolve timing inconsistencies. Isabel also claims she did not kill Michael outright, but only seriously wounded him, and that he remained alive for some time. The prosecution asked why Lori never called emergency services, since Michael might have been saved. They argued that Isabel had changed her story multiple times and, like Lori, was lying to reduce Lori's culpability. However, prosecutors could not present a fully convincing alternative sequence of events. Authorities suspect Isabel either colluded with her mother, Lori, or was manipulated into confessing. The theory was that Lori encouraged her to confess because, at 7, Isabel could not be imprisoned. Detectives, meanwhile, had gathered extensive evidence during the years leading up to trial. Despite that effort, not a single witness corroborated Lori's claims. Friends and family said they had never seen Michael act cruelly toward his wife or daughter. They described him as peaceful, calm, and conflict-averse, and said he never laid a hand on Lori. Neighbors also reported no signs of frequent arguments or abuse. Despite Lori's claims of near-daily humiliation, insults, and beatings, the only potentially supporting evidence was Lori's brief request for a restraining order, which she withdrew within a few days. Investigators found no records of other incidents. The prosecution's witnesses rebutted Lori's testimony, and their numbers significantly outnumbered the defense's witnesses. Many people believed Lori was the toxic partner in the marriage. She repeatedly insulted and humiliated Michael, often in public, and even threatened him. She physically attacked him several times. One neighbor testified that he saw Lori point a gun at Michael. That night, Michael was terrified because his wife threatened to shoot him. Notably, this incident occurred just days before his disappearance, which was later determined to be a murder carried out in a similar manner. There were too many troubling coincidences. Many knew Lori was not a victim. Rather, she had allegedly abused Michael for years. Her attorney argued that Michael was a skilled manipulator who concealed signs of domestic violence and pointed to several negative incidents in his past. However, this defense was unconvincing. The only significant entry in Michael's criminal record was a September 2014 charge for initiating a fight. According to the case file, he admitted guilt, apologized, and did not contest the charges. Even one of Lori's friends testified against her, stating that Lori had once admitted to cutting and bruising herself to make Michael look abusive, a tactic used to obtain a restraining order. Some witnesses, however, claimed both spouses were equally toxic and abusive. The case was full of contradictions, and the jury had to decide. After both sides presented their arguments, the jury deliberated for 5 hours and found Lori Shaver guilty of second-degree murder. The jury did not believe Lori's testimony that Isabel, a 7-year-old girl, shot her father, Michael, and that Jerem helped dispose of the body. Lori's attorney announced plans to appeal, but those efforts failed. She remains incarcerated. In the aftermath, Michael's family spoke to journalists several times, trying to restore his reputation. They described him as talented, kind, and likable. Even so, the public opinion remains divided. Some see Michael as a victim, while others view him as a cruel abuser who met a fitting end.